Welcome to the Milcam Sessions. I'm Miller, the Mill in Milcam, and this is
Cam from the Milcam Sessions.
in episode 4. We have a haunting tale of a disappearing town, a horrifying hag legend from Newfoundland, and the story of a uniquely chilling cryptid south of the border. But first, what happened to Granger Taylor? Was he truly taken aboard an extraterrestrial craft to travel the depths of space? Or was there a more simple explanation? We're going to leave that up to you after hearing the first story. So, welcome again to episode 4 of the Milcam Sessions, and let's get on with the story of the disappearance of Granger Taylor. Granger Ormond Taylor was born on October 7th, 1948, in the town of Duncan, British Columbia, located on the southeastern shores of Vancouver Island, halfway between Victoria and Nanaimo. As an infant, Granger's father tragically drowned while on a trip at their cabin on Horn Lake. When Granger was 2 years old, his mother Grace met and married a widower named James Taylor. Granger's earliest years were spent as part of a blended family, with Jim and Grace having 8 children between them. From an early age, it became clear to both Grace and James that there was something rather peculiar about young Granger. He was a loner and socially awkward. However, while he may have lacked social skills, he possessed a remarkable understanding and all-consuming passion for mechanics. As a young child, Granger spent a significant amount of time alone in his room, taking apart toys and gadgets in order to learn more about their inner workings. Despite Granger's mechanical intelligence, he had little interest in school, dropping out after the 8th grade. Rather than academics, Granger turned his focus to apprenticing with his neighbor, who just so happened to be an auto mechanic. Granger was like a sponge, absorbing all the knowledge he could from his auto mechanic mentor. Only 1 year later, Granger felt that he had accrued all of the knowledge he could from his apprenticeship, so he decided to set up his own shop at his parents' home. Along with his shop, he would build his own unique creations, which he would sell to private collectors or the provincial government for a rather hefty sum. Soon, it was evident to Granger's family, neighbors, and those who came to view his creations that the socially awkward teen had found his calling. And, at the age of 14, he built a single-cylinder automobile, which is currently on display at Duncan's BC Forest Discovery Center. 3 years later, even more amazingly, Granger rebuilt an abandoned bulldozer, which had previously been written off by heavy equipment mechanics as unsalvageable. In his early 20s, Granger completed yet another astonishing project. He found an old, rusting steam locomotive in the rainforest and, over 2 years, restored it to its former glory and put down tracks in his parents' garden, offering rides to neighborhood kids. On New Year's Eve, 1969, roughly 6 months after Granger finished hauling his last piece of his rusted locomotive onto his parents' property, a strange event took place at the Cowichan District Hospital, which was a short distance from Granger's home. At around 5 a.m., 4 nurses who were attending to patients on the geriatric wing saw a brightly lit flying saucer hovering about 3 stories off the ground. The first person to see the craft, Doreen Kendall, claimed to have observed 2 humanoid pilots standing in the cockpit as she looked out the hospital windows. The nurses looked on in amazement as the craft flew behind the trees and disappeared like a shooting star. Later that morning and the following evening, citizens from all over Duncan and the surrounding area came forward with similar UFO sightings. For months, all anyone in southern Vancouver Island could talk about were the invasions from outer space. It was not long before Granger became one of the island residents to be swept up in the UFO phenomenon. Shortly after completing the work on his locomotive, Granger developed an interest in air travel. Obtaining a pilot's license, and he began to work on his next project, restoring a World War II Kitty Hawk fighter plane, going on to sell it to a private collector for $20,000. By the 1970s, traditional aeronautics no longer interested Granger, so he embarked on his most ambitious mechanical endeavor yet, understanding the propulsion of a flying saucer. To do this, Granger set out to build an office that was roughly the same dimensions as a reported flying saucer. Granger began his mission with the help of local teenagers who took an interest in his work, and together they began scavenging 2 satellite dishes, using them to create a cylindrical building at the edge of his parents' garden. He placed the satellite dishes on stilts and decorated the outside with a lightning bolt design, with a port-shaped window. Granger went on to outfit his craft with a wood-burning stove, a couch, and a television. Granger completed his office with science fiction and pseudo-science fiction books written on UFOs in order to help stimulate his ingenuity. His office complete, his literature in hand, Granger put his mechanical knowledge to use and pondered the question of UFO propulsion. From 1979 to 1980, Granger spent his time in solitude, poring over his literature, pondering the question of UFO propulsion. After many months in contemplation, something extraordinary happened. While laying in bed one night, Granger was allegedly contacted by extraterrestrials. Robert Keller, a troubled teenager who Granger had befriended, explained that Granger went on to share with him that he received telepathic communications from beings beyond our solar system. In the months prior to making contact, Granger had built a kind of radio in order to make contact, believing that his willingness to open communication between himself and these beings is what led to them choosing him to go on their intergalactic journey. Granger would go on to have multiple telepathic communications with these beings, and during these conversations, Granger would ask questions pertaining to UFO propulsion. The beings remained tight-lipped about their propulsion system, but did offer one intriguing clue. The propulsion system had something to do with magnetism. In October 1980, with excitement in his voice, Granger confided in Robert and another friend, Bob Nielsen, that he had been invited on a trip through the Milky Way galaxy. Granger's friends had their doubts, thinking that their eccentric genius friend simply had a vivid dream or hallucination. That being said, his friends couldn't dismiss it entirely, because they knew if extraterrestrials were to select anyone on Earth for such a journey, it would be Granger. Granger went on to state that the aliens would come to collect him on a rainy night, so no one else would be able to see the extraterrestrial craft. Robert Keller asked Granger if he could go with him, and while Granger had shared the request with his intergalactic voyagers, they had declined, stating that Robert had more things to do on Earth, and this was Granger's mission alone. On November 29th, the town of Duncan experienced what reporters referred to as the storm of the century. Around 6 p.m. that day, Granger paid a visit to one of his favorite diners, Bob's Grill. The waitress who served him noticed that Granger was ill-prepared for the weather, wearing only jeans, logging boots, and a knitted brown sweater. Approximately 30 minutes later, Granger paid his bill and drove off in his 1972 Datsun, either light blue or Pepto-Bismol pink in color, depending on the source, with Robert Keller stating that he helped Granger paint his truck pink. Granger Taylor was never seen again. The next morning, while the residents of Duncan were clearing up debris from the previous night's storm, James and Grace Taylor, the parents of Granger, awoke to find their son was gone, leaving a bizarre note taped to their bedroom door, which read as follows: "Dear Mother and Father, I have gone away to walk aboard an alien ship. as recurring dreams assured a 42-month interstellar voyage to explore the vast universe, then return. I am leaving behind all my possessions to you, as I will no longer require the use of any. Please use the instructions in my will as a guide to help. Love, Granger. On the back of the note, there was what some believe was a hand-drawn map directing to Waterloo Mountain, located about 15 kilometers southwest of the Taylor residence. James, along with his sons, searched everywhere they could think of for Granger, contacting hospitals and driving lonely logging roads, hoping for anything leading to Granger being found safe and sound. Following the directions of Granger's note, his family read his will and noticed that the word deceased had been changed to departed, and despite his family's efforts, there was no trace of Granger or his Datsun pickup truck to be found. On June 29, 1983, 42 months after Granger disappeared, his stepbrother, Douglas, an officer in the Canadian Coast Guard, sat on his patrol boat for half the night, scanning the skies for any sign of Granger's ship. But, with a heavy heart, he turned in for the night, with no sign of Granger or the craft. In April 1986, a work crew discovered an unnatural crater, which was several meters in diameter, off of Mount Provo Road on the slopes of either Mount Provo or Sickler Mountain, both overlooking northwestern Duncan. Scattered throughout the crater were the remains of what appeared to be a rusted-out pickup truck. The local detachment of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police were alerted, and upon arriving on the scene, they made a discovery determined to be human bone fragments not far from the crater. Many Duncan residents, including his family, believe that the remains belonged to the missing Granger Taylor. But, as DNA technology was in its infancy at the time, this has yet to be definitively proven. In the aftermath of the gruesome discovery, a number of theories were proposed regarding what happened to Granger. The first theory, which is widely believed, is that Granger packed his truck with dynamite, which he normally used for clearing tree stumps, drove into the wilderness, and either deliberately or accidentally detonated the dynamite. This belief is bolstered by Granger's inability to solve the mystery of UFO propulsion, and being unable to cope with his failure, deciding to end his life, fabricating the story of his interstellar voyage in an attempt to ease the pain of those he left behind. Granger's friends and family challenged this assertion, as they were adamant that Granger was not suicidal, and if he had indeed blown himself up with dynamite, it was a tragic accident, theorizing that he may have brought the dynamite into the forest to use as a form of providing his extraterrestrial visitors a means of finding his location. Granger's sister, Grace Ann Young Reynolds, offered her own explanation. She stated that Granger had indulged in the use of marijuana and LSD. Grace Ann feels that Granger's use of LSD would account for his extraterrestrial contact. However, Robert Keller disputes this, saying that Granger did not do any drugs around him or any of the other neighborhood kids. He was simply a pot smoker. Still, LSD hallucinations cannot be completely ruled out as contributing to Granger's disappearance. Still, others, including Granger's late mother Grace, along with his friend, Robert Keller, wholeheartedly believe that Granger was picked up for his interstellar journey by extraterrestrial visitors on the dark and stormy night of November 29th, 1980. Who knows? Maybe Granger is still on his intergalactic journey, completing his self-imposed mission of discovering the secret to UFO propulsion. After all, according to Albert Einstein's theory of relativity, time dilates for objects traveling near the speed of light. With that in mind, perhaps one day a 35-year-old Granger Taylor will return home from his 42-month interstellar journey, finding an alien version of his hometown of Duncan. And we are back. And Cam, I'm sure you've got probably hundreds of questions about this story because you seemed super eager when you read it
Oh yeah.
and listened to edit.
Uh,
So go ahead, have the floor, sir.
Man, I loved it. I also was just very surprised that this was like a Canadian story, and I'd never heard of this before. Um, and I guess you said that you were tipped off on it because there was a documentary on CBC Gem about it, and you did send it to me, and I didn't get around to watching it, but I think you covered the story so well that I'm like, I don't even need this CBC Gem documentary. Uh,
I
I
I really appreciate that, honestly. It it gave me a few more tidbits to kind of fill in the gaps other than from the resource material that I had,
hmm.
like that I had read and compiled for the story. Um, I wasn't necessarily tipped off from the doc, but like it was almost like further exploration. Like I know I'd sent you Northern Mysteries, that YouTube compilation there,
Yeah.
around Halloween. The narrator of that show has a second story or story, a second show actually called The Missing Link, and that's the first time I ever heard of Granger Taylor, and
Oh. Hmm.
and I just thought it was really interesting. And then I guess there was an anniversary point, might have been around 2020 actually, where they were just saying, "Oh, there's this documentary called Spaceman," and I was like, "Oh, you know what? I wonder if that's who I think it is." And it turns out that yeah, it was Granger Taylor. So I had to watch that. I still highly recommend to check that out because they have interviews with his family members. They have interviews with his friend Robert Keller as well, and that's kind of where I got little bits and pieces of information that wasn't available in any of the resource material that I had found and sent to you when I was doing the research for the story.
Hmm.
And I wanted to kind of throw those in. And um, if you have the link still, I would definitely say to throw it in for the listeners as well, just so they can check it out. And I obviously want to cite it because it did help me fill in some of the gaps of the story as well. And
Yeah.
it's a very interesting listen. I say more listen than watch because it's like mostly just interviews, but they do show some video footage of Granger's inventions or the vehicles that he worked on. I know there's the car that the story mentions first, which I just thought was incredible, knowing that he built this thing himself as a teenager.
Yeah.
Because I mean, blind guys aren't mechanically inclined to begin with, but still, a man with an eighth grade education was able to do something like take a rusted out locomotive and completely restore it. It was truly incredible. Like the UFO or extraterrestrial aspect notwithstanding, like he was still a very fascinating man.
Oh, 100%. Like I think I mentioned to you that like when I was reading about this story from the script you sent, that I was really picturing like Garth from Wayne's World in a lot
Mm-hmm.
of ways. Like he really comes across as either like a prodigy or a bit of like a savant with like mechanical, technical things. And like he has this such a storied, almost like legendary past of like the one cylinder automobile, the old piece of machinery. Was it like a bulldozer? That
Yeah, he did restore a bulldozer as well.
like who knows how to restore a bulldozer? I sure don't.
Right? And then the fact that, licensed heavy equipment mechanics basically wrote the thing off and said that, it was basically, done, like past its shelf life. And then he was able to take it and restore it to fully working order. Like, it's just remarkable.
Yeah. So like the guy was clearly incredibly gifted, and like it does almost read like like a coming of age story in a way. Like I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Explorers. which is like this movie from the 80s with Sean Astin when he was a kid. And basically, these kids are getting a message from like a UFO or
Mm,
aliens, and they figure out how to build this basically their own space ship kind of thing where it creates this like energy bubble around them, and they fly up to this mothership. And uh, I used to love that movie. So
wow.
it kind of gives that vibe a little bit as well. But this is almost like the more grounded and like it's a true story that happened. So
If this
it's
came out before 1980, I wonder if explorers might have been loosely inspired by it.
yeah, I don't know, maybe like it. I'd have to look into that because I really like that movie. Like, it was one that you would find on Family Channel on like a random Sunday afternoon and be like, "What is this?" And it was just a really really good movie.
Yeah,
That I guess we'd recommend our viewers also check out. We're kind of dropping a movie list for everyone. The Spaceman documentary, Explorers. Like, yeah, check both of those out. Um, but yeah, no, I did have a question. Like, my first question about this story was, um, maybe just more clarification in case you know, but I guess there was a 2 year period in 1979 to 1980 where he kind of became like isolated and weird in a way, right?
yeah.
Uh, it's described like he had that time in solitude where he was just poring over his literature and like wondering about how to make a UFO. Like to me, that I almost do wonder like was he could like I do think that there's a the more grounded and unfortunately less fantastical possibility is that he was developing like a psychotic episode potentially, which sometimes
Mhm.
you see people that become more withdrawn and then that's a part of their psychosis or schizophrenia. So I don't know. It's interesting. So I'm just curious if you know more about
That's the
that period of his
that's the
life.
thing. Like the way I interpret it, um, they go on. Like his parents went on to mention that he was, kind of a solitude seeking and an introverted child even. So it
Mm,
doesn't really surprise me that he almost has like a level of hyperfixation. Like I know we haven't gone right out and said it, but I know in the doc there's talk about him potentially being autistic or even
mm,
having something like like Asperger's, like being on the higher functioning end of the autism spectrum.
right.
And I could see that. And I don't feel that he was entirely alone in the sense that he shut himself off from everybody because he took the time to confide in his friends. And um his friend Robert Keller even says, like, in the documentary, he got to help paint the UFO along with the that Kitty Hawk plane, the World War II plane that he restored.
Oh
uh
yeah.
like Robert Keller goes on to say that if you were to see that plane in real life, if Granger still had it, he'd be able to, like, Robert would be able to point out a tooth that he painted himself on the on the plane because it has a bit of a shark design on it.
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah, so I think that there probably were extensive periods where Granger was just hyper focused on what he was doing, and did kind of shut himself off because he was so determined and driven
Hmm.
to understand UFO propulsion. But I also feel that he did allow his friends to be a part of that experience with him, like as and when he could. So I can't see it, like when you describe it, I almost think of something like the story of Christopher McCandless, where he just went and like completely shut himself off and like lived in the wilderness, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas I think this story is different. I almost view it not so much as isolation, solitude, and potential psychosis, but more of like a hyper fixation and just a very intense focus on this one goal. And
Hmm.
I know as we get into the meat of the story, regarding the note that he left with his parents and things like that, um, part of me wonders if this is just an all-consuming thing, and then maybe toward the end he just realized that it was something he was never actually going to, like, never going to be able to get a resolution to that was satisfactory for him. Because
Mm,
if you look at everything else he's done, he accomplished it, right? Like, he set out a goal to build a car, he did it. He set out a goal to restore an old locomotive, he did that. Then he moved on to aeronautics and, restored an old plane. But
mm,
then he just found the one thing that he couldn't crack, which was UFO propulsion, and only learned from his extraterrestrial well, I guess telepathic communications, for lack of a better word. Uh, he learned that it had to do with magnetism, and that was basically it. And
mm.
I can't help this. I don't know if you've ever seen it. This is kind of a dumb tangent, but like, when I hear anything involving magnets, the very first thing I think of, have you ever heard of magic mesh?
No, what's that?
Okay, so it's like this screen that you can use in your house, and it's meant to prevent bugs from getting in and out. And it's this
Mm.
guy who's like really enthusiastic, and he's like, there's no secret. It's magnets. And when you'd walk through the door, like, you'd hear a magnet click and it would like shut the mesh. So every single
Uh,
time I hear anything involving magnets, I can't help it. That's the very first thing that I think of, because it's just,
Wild to me that it's not that line from ICP where it's like magnets. What the heck are those? Or I forget how
yeah,
that goes,
yeah,
but
yeah, magnets. How do they work?
how do they work?
that too, that
Uh,
too. But I had a feeling that that's more of a well-known one, whereas the magic
mm,
mesh is like extremely niche. Like, I remember seeing commercials for it when I'd watch like unsolved mysteries on a channel here. It's called Lifetime now. I can't remember what they called it before, but it was on a cable provider we have called Shaw Cable, and
mm.
they had an unsolved mysteries episode that aired every night at 8 o'clock on weekdays. But yeah, I don't know, but it is a good question. It's a good like, it's a good ponderance. Like, how much did he isolate himself when he did it? Unfortunately, that's something I never really came across. So the best thing I could do is kind of just go based on my own interpretation of who I pictured him to be as I was doing my research for it, if that makes sense.
No, and I think it's a question that might never fully be resolved unless he returns from like a space voyage or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that didn't quite click, like, and his mom and his friend noted this as well, but like there didn't seem to be any indication in his note that he was leaving, like a note to say goodbye that he was going to end his life. It really didn't indicate that quite at all. And like I don't I don't know about the whole. Anyways, the theory that he like blew himself up with dynamite. What do you think about that? I don't think that that's very likely. It just doesn't seem correct to me.
Um, well, the thing that kind of, like, I'm wanting to believe that he was able to go on this interstellar journey, and the reason why it's still, he's potentially still out there, is the fact that, he's going through basically hyperspace and time. So,
Oh, yeah.
42 months to him might be many years to us. That said, I can understand, if you are all consuming about something and you have this one goal and you feel tantalizingly close to solving it, and then you just, for whatever reason, you just can't get that last piece of the puzzle, you know, it could potentially lead somebody to do that. But I don't think that he, like, if he did, pass away in that crater, I don't think that he did it intentionally. I think what happened was he brought the dynamite with him, maybe as a way to, flag his extraterrestrial, uh, I guess, chauffeurs, for lack of a better word. I don't know, because they're taking him on a journey. Like, what would you say, like, extraterrestrial taxi? Like, I'm not really sure
Yeah.
how to word that,
His
but
his extraterrestrial Uber.
Uber, yeah.
Yeah.
or I could say U Ride, which is like a Thunder Bay thing. But
Yeah,
but
we're not
yeah,
gonna mention Lyft.
yeah, fuck Lyft, man. But no, because I could see that, um, he might have thought because it was a very heavy, rainy night that if he was able to set the dynamite off correctly and get it, to kind of light up the sky, that would let the craft kind of pinpoint where he was and be able to take him. But
Yeah.
without the proof, you don't know. And one thing, and this is why I wrote it this way in the story, is if you look up this case and research it, or even watch the doc, some people will say that he had a blue Datsun. Other people say that he had a Pepto Bismol pink Datsun, and I subscribe to the Pepto Bismol Datsun because Robert Keller even says that he helped Granger paint it. So if you're
Mm.
getting that type of, you know, basically eyewitness testimony to basically be like, yeah, I helped him paint it pink, unless he went back and painted it blue for some reason. I'm thinking that, the truck blew up. And who knows, maybe he blew the truck up because, well, if he's going on this interstellar journey, and in the note that he left to his parents, he said he didn't need anything that he had with him, in the home, right?
Mm.
So it's
Yeah.
not hard to think that he may have just intended to blow the truck up and not himself, and maybe unfortunately was caught in the blast if he did pass away because they found bone fragments. Um,
Mm.
Another thing, and I know if you don't ask me this, I apologize for bringing it up. It was a question that you had, but
Sure.
um, the reason why they haven't been able to do any more DNA testing on the bones, unfortunately, they lost the samples they had. So
Oh.
when they tried to do it in the 1980s, they didn't have the technology to actually determine whose bones they were. They only knew that they were human. And then the samples
Mm.
got lost after that. Because,
I did wonder about that.
yeah, it was,
Um, What? Okay, I did have another question. I don't know if you've
sure.
looked into, so where the crater was found, was that close to where he said he was gonna go in his note?
It kind of got a little bit confusing because they mentioned three different mountain peaks.
Hmm.
And the one that he was saying he was going to, it didn't appear to be that one. Um,
Hmm.
so I'm wondering if maybe even then, um, I'd have to look up the directions. To be fair, I maybe should have, maybe should have done that. So
Yeah.
thank you for calling me out,
No, it's
not being
okay.
thorough for that part.
I actually thought about looking it up on Google Maps too, but
Honestly,
um,
honestly, should I'm so focused on the reading and retaining and then turning the information into how I interpret it that I don't think of the
yeah.
visual aid thing, you know, the whole legally blind thing and reading maps doesn't really go very well. Um, but you know, again, it's one of those things that I can leave to interpretation. Like I'm wondering if even, he may know the direction well, but when you drive through heavy weather, whether it be rain, snow, what have you, it could be very disorienting. And maybe he
Hmm.
thought he was on his way to the mountain he was going to, but wound up by Mount Provo instead.
No, entirely possible. I also am wondering, like, what if this is some unrelated thing? And again, yeah, like then maybe. So if he did, be, picked up, if he was picked up by the intergalactic Uber, then this wouldn't be him that they found, and it's another mystery. Like, okay, well, what's this truck, and why is there bone fragments, and what happened here? Um,
That's that's a fair point, actually. I mean, it opens up a whole new can of worms for sure because
mm,
they never positively identified it as it being Granger's remains. They just said that it was human and that was it. So
yeah.
that would be an oh wow, that would be a very interesting turn if that was the case, where it was just another person. Because I do believe that the truck was his, especially because the metal fragments that they found were pink in color.
Oh, okay.
And that's why I
Mm,
say, but it's again without proof, it's very hard to know. Um, and I know one of the later details I actually had to add from the doc was his sister, which is also kind of confusing because she's named after her mother. They're both named Grace. So one is Grace, and then the sister's name is Grace Ann. But
So confusing. Why
right,
did they do that?
I don't know. I really don't know.
Grace Jr.
Damn it, Grace Junior. Can't help it. That has a very southern sound to it.
Yeah.
Oh my, oh my god. Um, but one of the later facts that I had gotten, well, not facts, but the one of the later tidbits that I got actually from the doc, and I had to add, was Grace Ann had said that Granger partook in LSD and thought that
Oh.
that might have been uh, part of the reason why he was the way he was. Maybe it altered his mental state, and she
Mm.
thinks that he was receiving those telepathic messages as LSD hallucinations. So, uh, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think that's absolutely a possibility. Yeah, some people when they're hallucinating, yeah, they sometimes think they're communing with um, divine beings, interdimensional beings. Like it's incredibly possible. So again, it's like yeah, it could have been that. It could have been him losing touch with reality in some ways, such as like psychosis, or it could have been actual aliens. Um, in which case, like you know, his friend did mention like if anyone was going to be chosen by an alien race to come join them, it does make sense that Granger would be chosen. Like he's
Mm-hmm.
a gifted man. He's very like technically minded, so maybe there's like a kinship with uh, beings that have developed interstellar travel. Um, so it's just the more like out there explanation. So with like Occam's razor, you would maybe say, well, let's wait for some proof on the aliens, but you know it's certainly possible, right?
Yeah, and I know for me, like I went through a lot of emotion while researching the story. I was very just fascinated and genuinely impressed with the type of accomplishments that Granger had throughout his life. But I know I had like almost a sense of profound sadness when I was reading and then hearing the story because again in the doc, um, Granger's brother, the one that was the a member of the Canadian Coast Guard, he actually mentions like directly in the doc that he did sit out on the deck of his patrol boat and was basically waiting for the ship
Mm.
to return Granger to him, and spending as much time as he could doing that. Like, man, my heart truly went out to him because I can't imagine it. Like, um, I know we tie things into The Simpsons a fair bit on this on this
Yeah.
podcast, but like I'm immediately picturing that scene with Homer when he says goodbye to his mom, and he's sitting
Oh,
on the hood of the car and he's looking up into the stars. Like,
yeah.
man, it's just I couldn't imagine that. Like if my son had done something like that where he left me a note saying he'd be back, in a certain amount of time, I know
Mm.
I'd be doing the same thing. I'd be looking up where I think he would be, and I'd be waiting, and to be hit with the heartbreak of him not coming back, like just yeah, I honestly can't even fathom that.
It must be so difficult, um, but in a way, it could be comforting because if he did unfortunately pass away, then maybe it's easier to think of him up there with aliens, seeing amazing things. But still, like, there's a difficulty to not knowing. Like, I'm sure his family are pretty reasonable and they have considered that, maybe he did just pass away somehow. But I think whatever happened, they lost their family member. He's gone, and they don't know if he'll come back. But there's that sense of like waiting for something that might not return. Yeah, that's really sad to hear about.
It's that sense of longing for some type of
Yeah.
closure, right? Like I know the way I
Mm-hmm.
look at it, and I say this all the time. If I have a choice between not knowing versus knowing whether it's a good outcome or a bad outcome, I'm always going to want to know, because then
Mm.
you can prepare for it and you can react to it. But when you're stuck in limbo like this, it's like, well, how do you move forward? Right? Because if they were able to prove that, oh, yeah, these are Granger's remains, okay, we can grieve, set up the appropriate plans for, funeral service, celebration of life, whatever you'd like to do. However, if he came back, obviously, that would be fantastic. They could, welcome him in and potentially resume his life. But it leads me to another question too. Like when I was again researching this, when I got to the end, imagine what would happen if Granger does return. Like the world and even his little town of Duncan will be so much different than it was 46 years ago. And I wonder if he'd be able to handle that.
I think it would be hard for anyone. And I guess the question would be like, would he return publicly? Would he,
Mm-hmm.
announce to people who knew him, "Hey, it's me," and then they would, see him and know it's him? Or if he returns, would he have to do it um, under like a new identity? Um, because like if he returned it proves aliens exist. It proves that they're in contact with us and that they're obviously bringing people off this earth. So there's going to be more questions. I don't know if the aliens are wanting that or if they feel like it's time for us to know that, or
Mm-hmm.
it would be interesting. Like I guess you could almost wonder like if aliens wanted to make contact, maybe they would want some form of like ambassador to humanity, and maybe a person that would uh, be adept at that would be someone who's lived with them and
Yes.
traveled with them and then came back.
That's I can't believe I didn't consider that, because
Mm.
it would make sense. And anybody who would be, a prime ambassador to to kind of bridge the gap between humanity and extraterrestrials would be someone like Granger, because he is a human being. Granted, described as an eccentric genius, but still,
Yeah.
he's clearly learned, and I'm sure he would be able to have a fair grasp on the English language at best. And then he can potentially work as almost like an intermediary between humans and extraterrestrials, because you're right, he's been with them for nearly 50 years now, which is just wild. Um, and I mean, I will absolutely uh, revisit this however many years down the line. If it turned out
Mm.
that he did actually come back, I'd have no problem doing that, because that would be a very interesting story to cover.
Oh,
Um,
totally.
but if not, I hope that he was able to find the solace and peace that he couldn't find in life, because he may have been a genius when it came to aeronautics and mechanics, but I feel that he had a very difficult time navigating the social aspects of life. And,
Yeah.
you know, for someone like me, I'll come right out on record and say it. I'm a socially awkward person. I have been my whole life. I'm sure I always will be. So, I've had moments like that where I've struggled to fit in socially, and it's been very hard, and I can
Mm.
have some level of fixation on interests too. Uh, listeners, if you ever want to know about that, like just ask Cam how I am with hockey discussion not too long ago. But it's just a crazy thing to think, and to know that the world you knew when you left 46 years ago has changed that much. um, it actually makes me think of a story that I want to cover later, uh, called the story of Henry Meliason, who was a man that had his hippocampus surgically cauterized out, and
Oh. Mm.
basically could not form any new memories beyond the point of that surgery.
Oh, that's really unfortunate. See
Yeah.
that that breaks my heart. uh
Oh, I
I
know. It's a very, like, it's equal parts sad and interesting, but that's why I'm tying it in. I'm also doing a bit of
yeah.
foreshadowing because I want to do that story.
No, I think you should definitely do that story. That reminds me of like when I was a kid, I watched the Adam Sandler Drew Barrymore movie 50 First Dates.
Yes, that's a movie I
And
have seen actually.
I remember being so sad at the end of it, even though it's kind of like a happier ending. That they had various side characters that had like severe memory issues, and I was so affected by it. So it's just bringing up memories of thinking of how hard that must be for someone. But yeah, I also, as a kid, was just like I was not expecting to feel this much from a freaking Adam Sandler rental with like a penguin on the cover and Hawaiian stuff, you know.
That's fair. Adam Sandler's not really meant to make you feel,
Actually, the
but
same thing happened with the movie Click too. I remember being like it went really hard on the emotions for some reason. And
so
anyways, yeah.
which click was better, Goosebumps or the Adam Sandler movie?
You know, the Adam Sandler movie, which I think we have proven was stolen by Goosebumps because Goosebumps came out first. Um, that's
Wouldn't that
not.
mean that Adam Sandler stole it from Goosebumps then if Goosebumps came
No,
out
that's what I'm
first?
saying. Yeah, he basically did, or they had the same idea, but it's too similar. Where I actually wonder if anyone ever pointed that out before, or if like the writers of Goosebumps tried to sue.
Hey man, we might have a bonus story on our hands then if
Yeah, this is this
nobody
is
did.
getting into a bit of a tangent, but like, anyways, it's kind of like a B minus tier Goosebumps episode. But it's a
That ending though.
that oh the ending, yeah, like the idea of breaking reality and just like existing forever in like a dark void, horrifying. I actually did, probably the episode gets most of its B minus from the ending, and then the rest of it is just like mildly amusing. What if we
That's
had a
totally
TV
fair.
remote that like fast forwarded or muted things or what have you?
That's totally fair. But you know, I will say, like, just to kind of get back on track with the story, I do love the fact that until her dying day, Grace, the mother, Grace. So I remember I said Grace, not Grace Ann, just to make sure we're not
Grace
confused.
Senior.
Yeah, Grace Senior, exactly. Grace the first.
Hmm.
Um, but I do like that her and Robert Keller, you know, wish to just cling to the notion that he is on that journey, and he may have said that he wanted to come back, but who knows? Maybe he's honestly just enjoying it and absorbing all the knowledge that he can, and
Yeah.
just content to be going through experiencing something that few, if any, would ever have the opportunity to experience in a lifetime or multiple lifetimes. Because I'm not gonna lie, it would be kind of neat to know that like you're still 35 years old. Because I'm 3 years past that now, and I'm disgusted by it. um, um, that you're 35 years old still, and yet you're experiencing these incredible things that nobody else can even begin to comprehend. Let alone
Hmm.
enjoy themselves. So, I kind of want to just end on more of a positive note here, but I also just want to make sure if I covered all of your questions to the best of my ability, or do you have anything else that you wanted to ask me about the disappearance of Granger Taylor?
I think you've covered all of my questions, Miller. So maybe, yeah, maybe we can move on to the next story if you feel ready.
I do. And I'm going to throw this one over to Cam, as this is one story of his. And it's very
Yeah,
interesting. It's a cryptid story that I have no familiarity with whatsoever. So I'm really glad that you found that and shared it with me.
that's because it's fairly brand new. A brand new cryptid. I'll maybe let the listeners and viewers just hear the story outright, and then we can join them back in a little bit, and we can discuss it further. On a perfectly ordinary night, a young woman named Kate was walking her dog around the downtown area of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. This was around the time of the COVID-19 pandemic, so the streets were mostly deserted as she began her way home. She did, however, notice one other person walking in the same direction as her, up an inclined, hilly road. This person was a small, stout old woman who looked just ancient. She was shriveled and had two white, milky eyes poking out from the folded wrinkles on her face. These eyes seemed to almost glow in the dim light. She must be blind, Kate thought, assuming the milk-white eyes to be severe cataracts. The woman was dragging a large, brown, leather suitcase behind her as she moved along, passing Kate and her dog. She dragged and she climbed up the inclining road, grunting with the effort. Kate, feeling bad for the woman, decided to catch up to her and offer some assistance with the bag. There was a homeless shelter and various halfway houses around this area of town, and she thought this woman could likely use some kindness and assistance. Her dog hesitated. The dog craned her neck in the exact opposite direction and began whining nervously. Yeah, Kate thought, I get it, girl. This lady is a bit weird, but we should really offer to help. She had to practically drag her dog along to approach the woman, but she soon caught up to her. At first, the old woman didn't acknowledge Kate at all and continued trudging on, occasionally shooting a furtive, glow-eyed glance in Kate's direction. Ma'am, maybe I could help you with that? Kate was being persistent, following her as she wasn't sure if the old woman heard her. Ma'am, would you like some help with your suitcase? The old woman finally stopped and shot a glare behind her. Those eyes, they looked so luminous. Maybe they weren't cataracts. Now the glowing had a green tint to it. Kate had only a moment to contemplate the woman's unearthly eyes before something even more bizarre and unusual began to occur. Horrified and confused, Kate saw the old woman transform. Kate became aware that the large brown bag behind her wasn't really a bag at all. Instead, it appeared to be something more organic, and something that was actually connected to the old woman's body. Two powerful hind legs stretched up, lifting massive brown haunches up and up and up. Am I going insane? Kate thought. This can't be real. She had never hallucinated before and did not use drugs, but she was unable to find any explanation for the bizarre sight literally unfolding in front of her eyes. The face and body of the woman transformed into an enormous head and front legs. The head morphed and shifted into something looking like a moose's head without antlers. This woman, no, this thing, was now at its full height. Moose height, which is to say about 10 feet tall. Its eyes were blazing as it towered over Kate. Time stood still for a single moment before the moose thing leapt up and galloped into the nearby copse of trees. It was out of sight, but she heard powerful snaps and cracks from behind the trees. This enormous creature sounded to be moving recklessly and erratically under the cover of the branches. The terror Kate felt washed over her all at once, and she tugged her equally petrified dog and began sprinting up the hill, heading in the direction of her home. She soon realized the cracks of branches seemed to be following her. The moose thing was crashing violently through the trees, moving in the same direction as Kate. She was being stalked by this being, and she did not want to find out what would happen if it caught up to her. Kate continued her desperate sprint home. Her dog's leash was dropped, but her dog was matching her speed as they raced towards the neighborhood. Her life flashed before her eyes, and she worried that she might not make it home to see her 1-year-old son or her boyfriend ever again. She still had about 6 or 7 blocks left, an agonizing distance to close before she could reach the safety of home. Suddenly, a truck drove up to her and rolled down the window. A man inside shouted, "Hey, I saw it too! Keep running and I'll hold it off as long as I can." He revved the engine and lurched forward, speeding up the road. He circled around and did the same thing again in the opposite direction, heading back towards her. He slammed down his horn excessively and continued to drive up and down the street, blaring it loudly. Kate was sobbing as she ran, but she was almost home. Her lungs felt ragged from being out of breath. She finally reached her driveway and leapt up her steps to the door. Her boyfriend was already opening the door for her, and she and her dog leapt inside. Her boyfriend greeted her, asking what all the honking and commotion was outside. She immediately broke down sobbing, and he realized something was terribly wrong. This was the most horrifying experience Kate had ever had, and she was still on edge. She rushed upstairs to check on her 1-year-old and make sure the horrible creature didn't somehow take him. Thankfully, he was dozing peacefully in his crib. Finally, Kate slowly began to settle, feeling like she might finally be safe in the confines of the home. She was never able to find the identity of the guy in the truck who tried to distract the creature, but she felt immense gratitude for him, for his help in buying her and her dog time. The following day, she noticed that along the hilly road, there were some trees that had been snapped practically in half. It was almost as if a bulldozer ripped a path through the trees. She had walked her dog up and down that hill countless times and had never seen the trees broken like that before. Beyond this evidence that what she experienced was not all in her head, there were no other signs that the colossal creature or the small old woman were still in the area. Kate never saw this being again. Shaken deeply by this encounter, she followed up with medical professionals to assess her mental health. By all their metrics, she was deemed to be fine and of sound mind. After this encounter, Kate reached out to some of the local indigenous tribes in the area, but all refused to talk about it with her. There are some local Ojibwe legends in the area which feature supernatural beings with moose limbs, a moose head, or other moose body parts. Kate's encounter also echoes indigenous legends from a bit further south in Oklahoma, particularly of a being known as the Deer Woman. The Deer Woman is a figure found in the legends of the Choctaw, Omaha, Ponca, Creek, and Potawatomi tribes. Some stories view her as more of a benign, shape-shifting spirit who sometimes appears during ritual dance ceremonies. She will often be seen with a scarf covering her head, obscuring most of her face. Some believe she can even help with fertility of young women trying to conceive. Other, more disconcerting legends paint her as a more dangerous force to be avoided. Some tales of the Deer Woman tell of her previously being a young woman who was essayed before the spirit of the old woman possessed her. The Deer Woman has been known to trample wayward children and girl-crazy young men who get caught alone with her in the deep forest. She can shift her appearance from being young and beautiful to old and ancient, to her more animalistic deer or elk form. Many indigenous tribal elders choose to avoid discussing these tales when possible. Sometimes they believe putting a name to an encounter such as this can have unintended consequences, particularly encouraging further activity from the being. Kate never felt fully at ease in her neighborhood again. She noticed a series of odd and unfortunate events occurring in her neighborhood soon after the encounter. She was talking to one of her neighbors outside one day, and the neighbor's house caught on fire and burned down in front of them both. On this quiet residential neighborhood, a driver somehow flipped their car over and had a horrific crash. With everything that had happened to Kate, the area just felt cursed, almost haunted afterwards. She didn't see the old woman or any other unusual beings ever again, but she always worried, what if? What if I'm walking my dog, or worse yet, my son, and it returns? Kate, her boyfriend, and her son moved out of that neighborhood shortly after. She wanted to put the place and the experience behind her, and was able to do so. Still, this mysterious encounter will always linger in her mind, remaining unexplained. And we're back from the Moose Woman story. What did you think of that?
So, it was very interesting and kind of terrifying, but I know even I took notes and even highlighted sections of the read through just because it kind of helps me to go through. I have to do this first because it's the very first thing I highlighted.
Oh
I
yeah.
know it's Al Claire or Euclair, but I literally had to think of Eclair first because I think when I was reading it, I was honestly thinking about food.
Oh,
And I thought about that Simpsons episode with that crazy chef that tried to kill
Oh,
Homer.
you're making me think of that too. Oh Claire, oh Claire, it's Eau Claire.
That works too, but I was actually thinking of this eclair is 1 million calories and 20 pounds of butter per square inch.
Oh, I can't believe you were thinking of like a different Simpsons chef
That works
reference.
too, though. I love that you tied the Eau Claire into chow dare. That was amazing.
Chaldea. Yeah.
Chow dare.
Say it
Um,
right.
um, but I just the very first thing that kind of got me with the description that Kate gives and that you so elegantly narrated, um, like her eyes, being milky white. I had to highlight, she must be blind because I'm like, hey, I'm blind too. But
Yeah.
um, it was just such a wild thing, and I get it, thinking cataracts at first, and
hmm
her first instinct is, oh man, here's this helpless, you know, at best partially sighted woman who's carrying this, big brown what looks like a suitcase, um, and yet, she obviously goes to offer help, but the lady's not interested. Um, but and then to find out, what she thought was a suitcase actually was, and knowing that her dog, kind of was wise to it before she was, it ties into our haunting stories, right? Like especially mine with of last episode of the King's Residence,
With
where
the animals that could sense,
yeah,
they actually weirdly liked the king residence though, which was
which
a
was
bit different.
a different thing for sure. But just
Yeah.
knowing it's like, oh, the dog knew, and she was trying to give Kate a cue, and just wasn't able to. But it was, like I say, just wild because I'm picturing this transformation, and I can't help it because like my mind immediately went to Animorphs. Like,
it Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't say Optimus Prime from Beast Wars with his like body turning around and his legs staying for the front ways or something like that.
oh my
Well,
god.
that's
Okay,
just Prime.
dude, I have to watch on Optimus Prime transformation because I don't think I ever noticed that his legs.
No, no, yeah, like his legs basically turn around at some point in the transformation.
Oh,
Uh, it's a cool transformation.
that's totally fair. But like again, she really focused on the eyes, right? Like even if I
Oh,
went further down, and just seeing, that they were just like white but also glowing, because it
oh
makes me
yeah,
think of when you see, a pair of eyes. Say if you go like hiking at night and you just see
yeah.
like, this bright kind of luminescent eyes, but you can't see anything else, right? It's just pitch black, and then that's it. So I'd be terrifying. But from what I heard and read, like this happened in broad daylight, no?
Um, I'm forgetting. Was it in broad daylight? Um, for some reason, I thought it was like nighttime or evening time. Like that kind of like evening time when you see everyone taking their dog for a walk.
Oh,
Um,
perpetual twilight, yeah.
yeah. So I think it was like closer to night because she is describing it was during the earlier days of the COVID-19 pandemic, so it was more deserted. But I think it was a bit of the nighttime. Um, Yeah, so what an interesting thing about like a lot of animals that have a glowing eyes, they have like a different um, part to their eye. I think it's called like I forget what it's called, but cats have it, and it's something
Kappa
that
lucidum.
that's it. I was trying to remember what it was called, but it's a whole different type of eye, and maybe that's what this woman has, and that's why at night, she has the green glow that humans don't really have. Um, and that's like the only initial thing distinguishing her from like being a human being was, the glowing eyes. But yeah, no, like it's such a thing that I also can't imagine what this would look like without conjuring up some like, late 90s Animorph digital morphing in my head, because it's like I
Hmm.
don't think there's ever been anything like this that is readily available to see
That's
outside
the
of
thing.
like
Like
deep sea like octopi.
if they had a deer version or like a moose version of like a Beast War Transformer, I probably would have went to that. But
Mm.
because they didn't, I'm literally picturing like this old lady on the front of like an Animorphs cover, like of the book, and then just slowly transforming into a moose with the Animorphs title, and I can't help it. But like
That's
my,
exactly what happened, Miller. That's like that's how it's described. Like she just kind of like morphed.
I know you even wrote morphed too, and that's kind of what got me. Like,
which
come
is
on,
which
you
is like a
leave.
very outlandish thing, and like it's one of those things where it's like, oh come on, like things don't really happen like that. But I swear, like this is the way this woman tells the story is incredibly compelling. She would have to be an amazing actor for her not to believe this and to be telling it in this way. And I'll
Mhm.
take this moment to say, like, I actually heard this story first on the Monsters Among Us podcast. So, like, I think it's an excellent podcast. Definitely go and seek out this episode from few years back. Like, if you just search like Monsters Among Us, Moose Woman, Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I'm sure you'll find it. Um, but like she tells it with a lot of conviction, and basically in the retelling, she's on the verge of tears. Like this clearly has traumatized her. Um, so normally like such a story, I would maybe hold with a bit less credence, but something really convinced her that this happened. So maybe it happened. That's my train of thought for it.
And I mean, that's the thing. It's how she interpreted it, right? And what she saw in the state of mind that she was in.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, when your adrenaline is going, you may tend to perceive things differently. Because I'm not going to discount that she saw this, especially with the fact that there are legends of indigenous myth, or sorry, indigenous legend that kind of ties into a sighting like this. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but unless you see something like that yourself, it's very hard to say. But some people can just have that ability where it's like they know the story happened to them. They convey it in such a way that you can just tell they're genuine. They're not acting. They saw what they saw. They were genuinely terrified, and rightly so. Which kind of leads me to my next point. Um, so I know that the when she was running from Moose Lady, with a very short distance to go to her house, about 6 to 7 blocks, a guy, came up to her in a truck and just said, that he saw it too. And while I commend him, for trying to keep the Moose Lady at bay so she could get home, I
Mm.
also just have a hard time understanding why he didn't just offer her and the dog a ride and like bring them to the house.
Oh, he absolutely should have done that. And like it's almost like a weird detail like that that makes it feel more real to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I have noticed like people when they panic, they don't think of the simple solution always. Whereas maybe he thought like, oh, it would be difficult to get the dog in the car, so maybe. But like, how does he know that she's like close to home? It doesn't quite make sense. But maybe they were just both panicking so much that he thought, nope, let's just like drive back and forth and scare it away. Or the logic doesn't quite make a ton of sense, but it did kind of work somehow. So like maybe their instincts were
Mm-hmm.
somehow right. Like is it the way that I would recommend they do it if it ever happened again? Probably no, but like it really worked, and the guy was a G for just kind of showing up and immediately saying, "No, I'm gonna help you. I'm gonna scare this thing away. You're gonna get home, and then I'm just gonna drive off and live my life." Hopefully, maybe he'll eventually call into Monsters Among Us and be like, "I saw that thing too," but I don't. believe he has as of yet, not to my knowledge.
That's totally fair.
Another
Um,
thing that I thought was kind of added to the story, just feeling like, like this is a real story. This isn't just like some made up BS. It was like, that kind of panicked emotional state where you're not always thinking the most logically. Like she mentions, she just like rushed to the room with her infant son because she just wanted to make sure the creature didn't take him.
mhm.
Like again, like why would you expect a random anamorph moose woman to want your son? Like nothing's really indicated that, but just in that panicked emotional state, I think her maternal instinct took control of, like, when you're so afraid, you make sure
Yes.
your kid is okay. Even though there's no reason to suspect that the moose woman would know she even has a son. She's just like, this weird shit's going down. I need to just check on my son, which is like
Yeah,
very real, like a real response that
it is a
people
real
would have.
response, but like the way that you explain it, it makes me think of two things. Like
Mm.
with the size of this moose being 10 feet tall,
How's
how would it be
how's
able
she
to get
gonna
in?
get in the house? Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, it just makes me think of like, if the Moose Lady did know where she lives, it's kind of like that Elmo thing from The Simpsons. Like Moose Lady knows where you live.
Or like the moose lady would have to morph back into a little old lady with a suitcase and knock on the door and be like, "Do you mind if I come in? I can't quite see very well, and I need somewhere to just drop off my luggage." And like, get away from here.
Oh. And I know you said that the story lends credence, but does it lend credence Clearwater Revival?
Well, I don't know. I feel like a fortunate son having heard this story because
And the moose did run
definitely
through the jungle, so
it runs through the jungle. Maybe maybe its name is Lodi. Okay, let's stop
yeah,
there.
I know. We're good.
Lodi. Yeah. Uh, but yeah, no. I think yeah, this was definitely the most interesting story I think I've ever heard on the Monsters Among Us podcast, and I think I actually started watching the podcast, or I guess listening to it, after it had first aired, and every once in a while there would be um, a call in, because it's a call in show where people call in their personal
Hmm.
experiences, and the host Derek Hayes would uh, harken back to the Moose Lady story, and some, like, I think he had an episode shortly after where he got like a flood of calls in, and some people shared like similar stories but that weren't quite the same. um, and then one indigenous person called in who did have some insight, and that kind of got me into looking a bit more into like indigenous legends,
Yeah.
um, because he was kind of connecting it to some of the indigenous legends that were a bit more south in the United States. So not exactly in the Wisconsin area, but yeah, no, like I again, it could be one of those things where it's like some tribes don't necessarily broadcast their legends to the world, and in
Hmm.
fact, most of them don't, and they might absolutely, like, if you talk to indigenous tribes people in that area, and if they felt comfortable sharing it, they might say, "Oh yeah, we know of this being. We just don't talk about it very often. We don't want to give it that power because we know it's dangerous," which is
Yeah,
absolutely a way they engage with such things quite often.
that's the thing. It's amazing that it comes across so many indigenous legends, right? Because if you were to talk to somebody like a Navajo about a skinwalker, most of them don't want to talk about it because they say that talking about them attracts their attention. And I know even in
Mm.
your story here, talking about the deer woman, it's also a similar thing where if you talk about it, it attracts their attention as well. Um, But I like that there are two different interpretations where, there's the malevolent version where, it's, oh, it's a, bad to see this animal, it could potentially attack you, that type of thing. But then also what really got me is that knowing it could be also a benign shape-shifting spirit that helps with fertility. I just found that very fascinating.
Well, like if you remember the story, there's nothing overtly aggressive about this cryptid. Like I think like at first this woman carrying luggage was not trying to speak to Kate or come in contact with Kate. In fact, she seemed to try and ignore Kate and seemed
Mhm.
frustrated or annoyed that Kate was like, trying to offer help in such a persistent way. And then she transformed. She morphed, she transformed, and then she just like dove into the copse of trees and started running. And Kate basically assumed and interpreted that she was pursuing her or following her, but like it could be that she was misunderstanding it. It could be that that was just the direction this being was going, or like she, like it's terrifying to see something so out of sorts like this that maybe you're going into survival mode. You're just like, I don't know
Mhm.
if this thing's actually following me, but I need to get the fuck home. And but I don't think there's like clear evidence that this moose woman was even like pursuing her. Like maybe
No,
she was,
no.
maybe she wasn't, but it could be that the creature was just as scared of her as she was of her, right?
That's exactly it. And I mean, um, you know, granted, Kate was trying to, perform a good deed and help an old lady that looked like she was struggling. But you're right, she did, ignore her, meaning the moose lady ignored her,
Yeah.
multiple occasions. And then finally, it's almost like, if you teased a pet, right? And you knew that the dog or the cat didn't like something, and then all of a sudden they scratch or bite you. It's like, well, you know, you may have had good intentions, but clearly they didn't work out the way that you were hoping because you irritated said animal, and now you have a consequence for it. But I also look at it like deer, because we have them here in a pretty big abundance.
Hmm.
Um, they turn tail and run when they're
Yeah.
scared, right? So maybe what the way I view this now is like maybe this lady transformed, into her alternate form. I said ultimate form, and then it made me think of Frieza. Like now you'll see my final form. But
It's just a
I,
moose.
imagine. Oh, it's just a moose. But it almost did it as like a threat display to be like, look, now you know what I actually am. Leave me alone. And then
Yeah.
it had this like adrenaline of, oh my god, I had to transform to get this lady to leave me alone. Now I'm scared and I'm gonna go retreat into the bush. Like
Hmm.
it's it kind of gives me that classic observation of deer behavior, because like I remember even I had a basset hound up till about a year ago, named Violet, and she would always chase deer, and they would turn tail and run. They would run away from her, even though they were like three times her size, but she had a very high prey drive and would chase them down. So, who's to say that the moose lady didn't think, okay, well, this woman, I don't know who she is. I don't know what she's saying, because I don't, at least from what I read and what I heard, this moose lady didn't say a word, you know?
No. No.
Um, so maybe she doesn't understand what she's trying to do and interpreted it as a threat. So then threatened back and then took off.
That's, I think, a reasonable interpretation. Like, this would be, it would be so interesting to actually talk with Kate and ask follow up questions. Like, maybe if we spoke to her, she would say, no, no, no. I know she was following me because of this reason. And like, I could, like maybe there is a reason why she truly feels convinced that she was being pursued. Um, but like, I think she just was genuinely spooked by something that was, genuinely quite spooky.
Yeah.
Like her comments afterwards about just feeling so uncomfortable and unsafe in that home still. Like the neighborhood just kind of felt almost cursed.
Yeah, I was gonna say because they're, I don't know how you keep coming up with stories involving fire, but
Oh, sorry, man.
no, no, it's okay, it's okay.
No, yeah.
It's better this time, but like, it's just wild to think that after this moose lady entered into the neighborhood, a person's house caught on fire, um, and a driver somehow flipped their car. Like,
Yeah.
that's absolutely incredible. And Kate obviously did the smart thing and took off and basically got away from everything. And this is kind of a bit of foreshadowing too, which I think is kind of funny. How like our next two stories are also going to be involving, uh, you know, girl crazy young men. And
In a
so I
way,
like
yeah.
I like that they have like an overarching theme somehow.
And yeah, like thankfully Kate wasn't that. maybe
Exactly.
maybe the moose would have like just like sprung out of a bush and like, impaled them, through the stomach if she was a girl crazy young man, like um but
You imagine that though? It's like the only words it says, "Stay away from my daughter." I
it's
don't know
like
why a moose
moose
would sound
attack.
like that, but yeah, moose attack. Oh, that'd be fantastic. Yeah,
But on that note, do you think we should get to story number 3?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, we covered this. We had some good banter with it too. But like I say, this was a very interesting story, and like I say, the the way that you cover it, the way that I'm always. This is gonna sound strange, but like I'm always really excited whenever you have a quote in a story because you always read the quote
Oh,
as a character, and I really like that. It's just
uh, thanks, man. I appreciate. I hope it's the appropriate level of dramatic and it's not hamming it up too much.
no, it's not hamming it up at all. If it was, I would definitely say it because I know for me, like I don't tend to do that little element of theatrics because like I'm more focused on just trying to read as like a kind of crisp reader. So I like the fact that you add a little flair and pizzazz into what you're doing. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, I'm good to go after buttering up Cam a little bit to to
Well, just call me Morning Toast. I'm butter.
powdered toast man. Um,
uh,
but no, this was a story that I wanted to cover for a while, and I don't know if you remember it because it was featured on Creepy Canada. That's actually where I first heard of it. But
mhm.
also, I have a family member that has been to the site of the Frank Slide, which is our next story. My brother actually lives in the area. He lives in Calgary, and this happened in Crow's Nest Pass, Alberta. So
Mhm.
my mom actually got to go and view the rocks and like actually see them close up, which I'm kind of jealous of. So I hope that I did this story justice because it was, to me at least, a very fascinating story about a thriving mining town that was buried one night by just an ungodly amount of limestone. I can't even fathom again like how much that is. So please enjoy the story of Frank Slide and the discussion to follow. In 1900, one of many coal mines in the Alberta Crow's Nest Pass was developed by two American businessmen, Sam Gibo and Henry Frank. As the coal mine took shape, so did the town named after one of these businessmen, the town of Frank, at the base of Turtle Mountain. The official grand opening of Frank took place 1 year later, on September 10th, 1901, as a day-long event consisting of sporting competitions where engraved medals were handed out to the winner of each event, along with other festivities including a tour of the mine, a banquet, and a dance. Two special trains were utilized to bring the guests and some gourmet food, of course, reportedly including a ton of ice cream, to the event. Passengers and food being brought by train made sense, considering the town was between the coal mine and a section of track owned by the Canadian Pacific (CP) Railway. Who presided over the grand opening of Frank? Why, none other than Henry Frank himself. With the grand opening, Frank became the first established town in the Crow's Nest Pass, and by 1903, the population had grown to 1,000 residents who supported 24 businesses. The town also had an elementary school and a registered post office. That same year, on April 10th, at approximately 4:10 a.m., a catastrophic event literally buried the town. Depending on the source, either 74 million Crow's Nest Past Heritage or 110 million Frank Slide Interpretive Center, tons of limestone came crashing down from the eastern face of Turtle Mountain. The resulting rock slide buried 3 square kilometers. Contrary to popular belief, the Frank Slide did not destroy the town. However, 7 homes, a number of commercial businesses, the surface infrastructure of the coal mine, along with 2 kilometers of railroad track, were directly in the path of the slide. It's believed that approximately 90 people were killed in the Frank Slide. The town was evacuated, but the evacuation was temporary, as approximately 1 month later, residents were allowed to return, and both the mine and railway were fully operational. In spite of the horrific tragedy, Frank continued to rebuild and grow, and by 1905, a new subdivision was built just north of the train tracks, which still stands today. A 3-story hotel, the Rocky Mountains Sanatorium, was also built, along with a zinc smelter to continue aiding in the mining process. However, due to market forces, the smelter was never opened, and instead was converted into a skating rink. If that misfortune wasn't bad enough, in 1911, the government ordered the closure of the Southtown site for fear of yet another rock slide. In the coming years, the remaining buildings were either torn down or moved, and by 1918, the mine, which had been the lifeblood of the town, closed down. The town of Frank, though as not prominent as it once was, still remains today, and is home to approximately 200 residents. Also, fun fact, around 1960, an improvement to the Kentucky Fried Chicken gravy recipe was developed inside the kitchen of the Turtle Mountain Inn. In 1977, the Frank Slide was declared a provincial historical resource, and in 1985, the province of Alberta opened the Frank Slide Interpretive Center, which offers a self-guided walking tour of the area where the slide occurred. One can only imagine residents' fear and panic as they were buried in their last moments of life. The energy must remain, even more than a century later. Visitors to the site of the Frank Slide have reported sightings of ghostly figures wandering through the debris, searching for their loved ones, along with unexplained lanterns. Visitors also reported an uncomfortable feeling among the ruins, along with the sounds of the cries of the victims of the slide that carry on the wind. Prior to the slide, the town of Frank was also the site of a gruesome murder. Monty Lewis, a prominent local madam with a fondness for extravagant jewelry, which she wore at all times, even to bed, who would also openly flaunt her escapades with the husbands of the women of Frank, had her life cruelly taken from her. One morning, Monty was found murdered in her home, and her trademark jewels were nowhere to be found. Unfortunately, vigilante justice prevailed, as the townsfolk had a newcomer to Frank accused and hanged for her murder, only for Monty's lover to later confess to her slaying. According to legend, Monty's spirit wanders through the town of Frank, mourning her death by the hands of her lover at such a young age. It is also said that Monty is known to lure hikers away from the safety of trails in the area. Is she one of the many voices on the wind from the tragic town? Or is Monty turning tricks? Or is she seeking vengeance upon the living? And we are back with the story of the Frank slide. So I know when you first read this, Cam, you told me that you had some questions. So fire away, and I'll try to answer them as best I can. They'll probably be ambivalent, but I'll try.
Well, I think I'll go right for the money here, which is like the ghosts. Like you mentioned that there have been some reported sightings of like ghostly figures wandering around the debris, um, searching for loved ones. Like, do they have like a hand in front of their brow, like giving a very good like searching face? Like, how do we know they're searching, and how do we know they're not just like hanging around? Are
That's the
we
thing.
like putting too much on these ghosts? Like maybe they know exactly where everything is and where their loved ones are, and they're just there.
That's the thing. Like maybe they are genuine slide victims and are there kind of just tied to the spot, right?
Hmm.
Because it's horrific tragedy and makes me think of something like Pompeii, where they had
Yeah.
kind of a flash eruption, which caught them at their moment of death, basically, and that was the last moment of their lives. So it was a very similar event in this case because you're sleeping. Well, I'm assuming most people are sleeping because this is happening at 4 in the morning. That then suddenly just this huge amount of limestone comes crashing down off the mountain and buries everything in its path. I just thought that was just absolutely tragic. And a place like that, to me at least, just screams to be haunted because it was such a sudden, unexpected loss of life of so many people. And just, you know, another thing too that kind of irks me is like this inaccuracy because I'm going through my notes again, like as we're doing this. Like I love how one place is like it was 74 million and another place was like no, it's 110 million. Well, which is it? I almost felt like I should average it out and then just say that it was like the average between both of these huge amounts because like both an insane amount of limestone, but
Why do I feel like I need to chime in as Marge and be like, it was a lot?
you kind of do. I thought you were gonna be like, I just think it's neat.
I just think it's neat.
Oh,
Just
but
imagine Bart being like, it was 74 million, and Lisa being like, no, it was 110 million. Can't we both just agree it was a lot?
oh god, I could definitely see that. But no, it's I just I could picture them just kind of going among the rubble. That's kind of what I got from the research. They never kind of said how they were searching through because to me if you're searching through the rubble I would think that if you were a living entity you would be trying to remove some of the rocks, but I mean obviously if you're a spirit you may not be able to do that unless you have the ability to physically move the world around you, which some spirits do.
Hmm.
Because I'm wondering if it's just those spirits that were buried and just kind of returning to the spot that their lives had ended, right? Or maybe
Hmm.
there are even spirits that haven't processed the fact that they're dead and are just going on about their lives, um, you know, as if they weren't buried under this huge amount of limestone. Because, like I say, the reason why I was inspired to do this story was actually because of your Ballycroy story from the previous episode.
That's
Um,
right.
because it made me kind of think immediately to the Frank slide. So, I hate this because like you'll you'll give me questions. I feel like I'm ready for them, and then they're always curveballs. And like if you actually threw balls at me and they curved, I'd probably be like black and blue by now. So I feel like I'm mentally black and blue and it
Well,
sucks.
not unless it curved around your head. Um,
That's true.
I think the fact that that the Ballycroy story, uh, you connected that with this just shows how many like really good stories about weird haunted Canadian little towns there are out there. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's just like an embarrassment of riches in weird little haunted Canadian towns that I think is just I think that's neat. I just think it's neat.
Oh, you know what you totally could have brought up for Ballycroy too, by the way.
Mm?
Shout out to Woods of Ypres. You could have been like your
Oh,
Ontario ground your
yeah.
Ontario town is a burial ground.
It absolutely was. Yeah, absolute shout out to Woods of Eeps. Uh, Eep? um,
I say Ypres. I don't know. I have to like
I
reach
think
out
it's
to.
pronounced like Eep.
Is
Like,
it just pronounced Ypres?
yeah, like it's a French place. I think there was like the Battle of Eep.
Oh, damn it, Kate. That's something I have to ask Kat about.
Oh, yeah, ask her about that
I
because
will. I'll be like, how would you pronounce this word?
I went a long time thinking it was Ypres or Ypres.
I always said
Um,
Ypres as well.
Not to be confused with Eat, Pray, and Love.
I
But
was actually just gonna say that,
uh, great minds thinking alike there.
right?
Um, but no, anyways, like I guess this is like the Alberta town, which was, you know, a massive burial ground in that people were buried there. And quite unfortunately, like yeah, like 90 people um, back then, you know, in a small town would have been like everyone would have known or had a family member that have would have passed away from that.
Yeah, there's actually I could link this as well. Because there's another show that I saw this on called Disasters of the Century, where they actually kind of went through and showed reenactments of the townspeople that survived,
Hmm.
and it was just very interesting to hear that. And I think there was like a story where one infant was somehow buried under limestone, but it fell in such a way that it actually didn't wind up landing on her, and they were able to save her. I think she was like under a year old,
That's like a really lucky baby.
right? But I hope that she was able to go on and have this like amazing, fulfilling life, considering she got like one of the most incredible second chances based on something like that. Um, I know this isn't necessarily tied into the to the rocks, like the limestone part of the story, but like, what are your thoughts on the name of their hotel,
Wait, what was the name of the hotel again?
the Rocky Mountain Sanatorium?
Oh, wait, that's not a sanatorium?
No, it's an actual hotel.
Why do they call it a sanatorium?
That's what I was wanting to know because
Are
to
you
me,
sure that there's not like a mistake there? Like,
that's I got it directly from the sources I found. One was like a government page through Crow's Nest Pass, Alberta, and then the other one was the Heritage Slide Interpretive Center. So I'm not really sure why they chose to name it the Rocky Mountain Sanatorium because obviously when you think sanatorium, you're thinking either a place where people with mental health conditions are housed, or when they were trying to contain tuberculosis outbreaks.
I genuinely don't know. Um, I was kind of caught up on like the KFC chicken
Oh man, I want
gravy,
KFC. I have no idea what that is, but that sounds cool.
KF kimchi. I avoid KFC. I have a lot of fried chicken and love it, but KFC does not agree with me. Sorry if KFC wants to be a sponsor for the
We'll get
podcast.
sponsored by Mary Brown's instead.
Yeah, yeah. Let's do Mary
I'm
Brown's
I'm good with that.
or something else, but no KFC. You
Love
need
your
to
chicken
figure
from
out what you're
Popeyes.
doing and why it isn't compatible with my gastrointestinal system, and you need to work on that.
Imagine if you just gave them that review. It's like I haven't eaten here for years, but
I'll
no,
leave it
I
at
figured
that.
you were gonna mention that because like the lighthearted side of this, it is kind of neat that they somehow took the KFC gravy and then improved on it.
Yeah, maybe it didn't. Maybe the old way, I wouldn't have gotten sick on KFC, but this
Wait
new
a minute,
improvement
you're saying that the
wasn't an
Proton Inn is
improvement.
responsible?
Yeah, maybe they made it worse. I don't know.
Oh
This
man,
is idle speculation, though. But wait. I also wanted to ask you though.
Okay.
So why did so this Monty woman, Monty Burns, she
Monty Lewis, actually.
Monty Lewis was
Oh, great. Now that song's in my head. Monty Burns.
my Monty Lewis was murdered. They basically they hung the wrong person, and
Yeah.
then her lover who actually did it got away with it, and then was like, actually, that was me. Like, why did he confess? I don't understand. I am a little curious about like what led to, like, was he just racked with actual guilt for like horrible murder, or was there another reason?
See, that's what I would think, honestly. It's something I wish I could have found more detail on, because the Monty Lewis portion was actually very obscure. I wanted to do it um, if I had enough research on it to do it as like a full second story, like a full separate story. But I was really only able to find like one blurb in some of the research that I had dug through, so I kind of had to go with what I was given,
Mm.
which is kind of a shame because like I first heard about both of these, as I said before, from Creepy Canada. So they covered the slide first, and they did Monty Lewis as kind of a backstory, like a or an additional story where they were just like, the townspeople aren't the only ghosts, and then they told the story about Monty Lewis. That's kind of like what happened to me here when I researched it too. But there are instances, obviously, even in modern true crime, where things like that happen. I know there's two of them that I can think of. There's a police officer from Rhode Island named Scott Hornoff who wound up confessing to murdering his mistress, but then I want to say he was in jail for about, what was it, 15 years, I think. And then finally, the guy's girlfriend actually confessed to killing her. And he just had kind of like this pang of consciousness. I think he found God, actually. And then
Oh,
when he converted to Christianity, he decided that he wanted to confess and get the wrong man out of jail. And then there was another one, a very well known case from Unsolved Mysteries of a man who had a severe intellectual disability. I think they said his IQ was around 50, if I'm not mistaken.
hmm.
Named Johnny Lee Wilson, and he was um, forced to confess to burning down. No, great. Now I'm talking about fires. But burning down his one of his neighbor's homes and killing her. And a guy actually was in prison in a different facility, and he heard about Johnny Wilson's story and basically felt so compelled to be like, no, I was at the scene of this crime. This boy wasn't there. He didn't, cause any ill will towards this woman. And it actually led to him getting a retrial and finally being freed. But I think he spent about a decade behind bars being
Hmm.
convicted of a crime um, that he or yeah, convicted of a crime that he didn't commit. But in this case, I'm wondering if it's something like that, where maybe the lover kind of went, oh, I killed her, and it caused the death of an innocent person. Because I know I'm foreshadowing a bit into your next story, but it's kind of the same thing where, like, you almost want to blame the outsider for these types
Oh
of
yeah.
things, right? Instead of being like, oh no, it can't be one of our townsfolk who murdered this woman of ill repute. It had to be the person that was just passing through town. And I mean,
Well, it's like the lazy police work of, well, the town is demanding justice, it's demanding results.
mhm.
Um, yeah, probably this random person we don't know. Um, and it's like laziness usually.
That's the thing. But that said, you know, there are multiple serial killers that will travel through and commit
Oh
murders as well.
yeah,
So I can kind of understand that. But I
it's
know
it's definitely a thing, but
in the time that this took place, though, I definitely have a hard time believing that just a person who passed through an obscure town just decided, hey, I'm going to randomly kill someone and steal their jewelry and not leave, before he was tracked down. Because I'm wondering if maybe they had seen him somewhere and identified him even before or after it happened, because it just seems rather peculiar that they just went, "Oh yeah, we know this guy. He's an out of towner. He did it." And then just this poor man. Like, I'm not even trying to laugh about the situation, because I mean, being wrongfully convicted and uh, executed via vigilante justice is, a terrible fate to have. But I'm just kind of laughing at almost like the idiocy of the townspeople, and yeah, if law enforcement was involved and just kind of wanted to rush to a conclusion, it's always easy to pin it on the outsider, pin it on the stranger, right?
Yeah, it's it's a natural bias to have, and maybe there were more circumstances around it that made the outsider seem more suspicious. But I think the real question is, like I'm imagining what she looked like sleeping with her jewelry at night. Did she just have like a tiara and like a million necklaces on and like bracelets, and she's
Mm-hmm.
just like decked out with like bling or something as she's sleeping, and she like turns around in bed and she's just like jangling. Like what?
I know, that's the thing. Like, it's hard to say. I could picture her being covered just in immense jewelry, and I think, if I recall, I have to listen to the Creepy Canada retelling again, because I think there's like a portion where they said that there was an argument between her and her lover, and then her lover, I think, was either unemployed or couldn't keep up spending on Monty's extravagant lifestyle, because she obviously wanted a lot of jewelry. She would flaunt it around the town. She would go out of her way to be like braggadocious and start, getting the other women of the town riled up about stories involving their husbands and things like that too. So she
Hmm.
just strikes me as that type where the world, like, she has to be the center of attention, or the universe has to revolve around her. And you know I'm wondering if there's like a level of narcissism here, right? And like,
Yeah, maybe.
it's I'm not saying that it's obviously a proper thing that this man had done, but maybe he reached a breaking point. Like, she could have very well just been demanding, demanding, demanding. He finally lost it, and then killed her. And at first, he's like, "Oh, I'll let this innocent man take the crime, because then I can get away with it and try to process it." Because, like, when you're in that moment, obviously you're a completely different person than you are when you're out of it. Like, once the
Hmm.
realization hits, like, "Oh my god, I did this terrible thing," you know, but I got away with it, but at the cost of an innocent man's life. Something can
Yeah,
just trigger it. You know, maybe he had like a conversation with like a family member or a friend. He confessed to them, and then it kind of was the snowball for that, or some other life event could have happened to this man, and he could have been like, "Oh, you know what? I really should come forward." And
could be. Yeah, any one of those things, but nothing's going to really, I guess, bring Monty back or this other person who was hung. Um, but I guess it was at least good that the truth came out.
it's also
Um,
funny too. Like I say, I know I foreshadowed it in your story, but to know that we've got that tie-in where Monty kind of leads hikers astray, potentially. Like, there's the legend of her doing that as well.
yeah, why is she doing that? Like, what's her deal? Like, she just being like, she was kind of annoying, like breaking up marriages in her life, and now she's just like, just fucking with people. Like, yeah, hope you get lost. Fuck you.
Well, I'm wondering if she's trying to turn like one last trick, right? Like, tempting a potential wayward hiker. I
Oh,
mean,
maybe.
it's hard
Is
to
she
say.
luring them in like a sexy way? Like,
That's what I was wondering. Yeah.
you come over, come over here, blowing kisses. You're like, hey,
When you did
that
the, oh
that early
god.
1900s woman sure looks like a sexy dame.
Now imagine if she was the same early 1900s woman that was seen in the general store.
Yeah.
Oh
Somehow she
man.
hopped uh, like three different provinces over,
I
and
mean,
that's
she
where
is a
she goes to
ghost. It's
sleep at
possible.
night.
She just yeah lives in the general store in Valley Croy.
That's a
Oh,
reference to the last episode, by the way, for anyone who missed episode 3. So go
so that's
watch
our
it.
subtle way of telling you to go back and watch episode
Yeah,
three
go.
if it's your
It's a
first
really
time.
good episode. You should definitely go watch it, and then the other two before it as well.
I'd say two and one are competent episodes.
The competent episodes, yeah. We really hit our stride around episode 3 and maybe 4. We'll see.
Because this guy forced me to buy a microphone. It was all my
Yeah,
fault.
yeah. The microphone is definitely superior.
But
Um, but anyways, I think we should maybe move along, unless there is any final points about this
well, that's what I was
remarkable
going to.
story.
I was going to ask actually if there was any point. Um, I know I will say this too, just because like when I first did this, when they were talking about when they opened up the town, I always think it's kind of neat that like I have this tie-in again to the Canadian Pacific Railway because it's very tied into my family. Because like
Mm.
I have an uncle who's an engineer, and I have an uncle who's a retired engineer for CP Rail. So I like that I kind of was able to do that. And I wonder too, just when they say that they had a ton of ice cream, was it like a literal ton or just a lot of ice cream to go to that party?
I don't know. I'm not too sure.
Me either. Just made me really want ice cream. So
I don't think I need a ton.
I wouldn't
One
need
of
a
those
ton
little
though. No,
tubs would be very sufficient, though.
just dummy like a little Haagen Dazs, you know?
Yeah, a little Haagen Dazs or Ben and Jerry's pint.
Yes, those
Yeah.
pints are quite good. Those are the only pints I like because I don't drink. But that's beside the point.
Ah, yes, yes.
But yeah, I'm totally fine to move on. So I'm going to move over to Cam to set up our finale for
So
this
this one,
episode, not the podcast.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. We're not finishing up at episode 4. There's going to be more, but yeah. Last story of the night is about an old hag. Um, so I'll let the story roll, and then we can discuss it afterwards. Not to be mistaken with the old hag, who is the sleep paralysis demon from mainland Newfoundland. The swamp hag of Bell Island primarily stalks the fetid swampland near Dobbin's Garden, Newfoundland. Additionally, this hag may not even be old, with her legend originating with the unfortunate death of a young woman many years ago. The woman who would become the old hag is generally believed to have died around World War II. Prior to the war, Bell Island would often have German sailors dock en route to trading destinations. The Germans would often purchase iron from the iron mines on the island, and they had fostered jovial relationships with the islanders. They frequently ate and drank together, the Newfies being pleased to break bread with some new faces who had tales from far off Europe, and the Germans being welcome to partake in some famous Newfoundland hospitality. But all that changed when Hitler rose to power across the pond. The Germans had become enemy number one and were no longer permitted to dock. Iron from Bell Island mines was diverted to Nova Scotia for manufacturing useful to the war effort. One cold night in 1942, a woman left one of the affluent houses on the island, setting off for home. She was from mainland Newfoundland but worked as a housekeeper on the island. She would take the late ferry across Conception Bay every night. However, on this night, during her journey, she encountered a few men hauling bags and supplies on the docks. They were glancing about, and one shot a furtive glance behind himself, locking eyes with the woman. She recognized him. This was one of the Germans she had broken bread with several years ago. He must be carrying supplies to a hidden U-boat stationed near the island, she realized as he dropped the sack he was carrying and made his way towards her. She turned tail and ran as the other men joined in the pursuit. She raced back around her usual path, but in the commotion, stumbled into the swampland, encircling Dobbin's Garden. Still, she was quite close to town, seeing the lights of her employer's house on, as well as a nearby tavern. She screamed to the townsfolk for help,
sure someone would hear her. However, as her voice began to run raw and her breath ran out, her pursuers closed in. Although distressed by her calls, the villagers begrudgingly ignored her pleas. See, many of the Bell Islanders were of Irish blood and still held to the old ways. With the Irish came the legends of dark fairies who could stalk the swampland and dwell deep in places of green and rot. Many a tale exists of these dark fairies on the island, and they were spoken about in hushed reverence by nearly everyone. A universal belief about the fairies is that they are cunning and are known to lure people into the swamps at night, hoping to catch them and drag them to a murky death. So, this woman called and called for help and was summarily ignored. She eventually stopped calling. The next morning, it was discovered that her calls were not fairy tricks, but genuine. The poor girl died all alone in the muck. Although her body was never found, her absence from work and her failure to make it home to the mainland were evidence of her end. The townsfolk, feeling guilty as sin, tried to put this horror out of their mind as quick and as best as they could. But this became easier said than done, as new disturbing stories arose, telling of a strange figure seen by the swamp. Every so often, villagers from Dobbin's Garden would come across a woman out by the marshes. From afar, she would appear fairly normal and unremarkable. Maybe a bit attractive, but for the fact that her face was always turned away. Still, this woman would always be an unexpected sight in the late hours. One man who was tending to his crops as it got late saw this figure. She swayed almost aimlessly, her white clothes catching the cool wind. He suddenly felt assaulted by a pungent stench that was so overpowering he felt weak and nauseous. Suddenly she dropped onto all fours and started bounding towards him like an animal. The man, startled by this, barely had time to register this bizarre sight before she was almost upon him. As she got closer, it became clear that there was nothing normal about her at all. Her clothes, which had appeared white, clean, and ordinary, suddenly looked filthy, rotten, and tattered. Stringy hair oozed over a horrible, corpse-like face. She was upon him in seconds and grappled him to the mucky ground, pressing him in the soil and water. Up close, worms pulsed out of lifeless eye sockets and gaping facial cavities. Her smell, that of pungent sulfur, was paralyzing, nearly knocking him out. Petrified and sure of his death, he gave up fighting this creature, wishing desperately just for it to be over. While holding him with her icy iron grip, she creaked her lipless mouth close to his face. If there was another soul around at that time of night, she would appear as a lover embracing for a kiss. Her rank had somehow gotten even worse as her jaw parted, ever so slightly. Out of her putrid maw, she whispered, "No one came to help me, and now no one will come to help you." Brown fluids burbled out of her mouth, dripping onto the man's face. "Taste what I tasted. Smell what I smelled. Feel what I felt." And he did, for he felt completely and utterly doomed. Doomed to a cold and miserable death when he had just been so full of life only a few minutes ago. Nobody would help him. And then she was gone. This man, like many others, would return to the village alive. Sometimes they'd return days later, not realizing how long they'd been gone for. Many would be reeking of the cloying scent of sulfur that would take weeks to scrub off despite vigorous washing. When their disappearance was chalked up to fairy mischief, the townsfolk would be corrected. No, it wasn't fairies. It was her.
Okay, and we're back. We just heard our last story. The Swamp Hag of Bell Island, Newfoundland. Miller, what are your thoughts on that?
This is a story that I'm actually familiar with, probably the same way that you are. Um, I first heard of
Creepy
it through Creepy
Canada.
Canada. Yeah, so
Yeah.
shout out to Creepy Canada and like the horrendous yet hilarious acting. Um, but I like that you went into more detail about the legend because I didn't really know about the German connection during World War II between Newfoundland and Germany prior to Hitler's rise to power.
Mm,
And I just thought that part was very interesting because they never touched on it. And because this was your story, I wanted to go into it with as little knowledge beyond what I already had before we started. Um, but it's sad to know that this poor woman, at least according to this version of the legend, uh, was screaming for help because she had originally seen Germans that were potentially taking supplies and stocking them to a U-boat, but then because she saw what she saw, at least from my interpretation of hearing and reading, um, that she was essentially attacked and killed by these German people at that time.
mm,
But I can understand the power of superstition and why the the townsfolk were so terrified because they do go into detail about the dark fairies. And I know one thing I was going to bring up, which I know that like I'm kind of glad you left out, so I can bring it up now. But when kids would go through Dobbin's Garden, one of the things that their parents would always do, particularly their mothers, they would take pages of Bible pages and they would put them in the pockets of the jackets of the children to try to ward
yes.
off the fairies. So
Hmm.
I was just thought that was interesting. So I'm glad that you mentioned the dark fairies in here as well. Um, and then I have to bring this up so I don't forget because I know I mentioned it to you previously and you wanted to hear it. So when you were explaining the story, like the encounter of the man when he meets the hag, and says like you will feel what I feel. I honestly couldn't help but hear Chuck Schuldiner singing the philosopher. Like feel what I feel, say what I say. It just it's like I say, I know the way my mind works, right? Like I have very weird connections, but it's it's still just a fascinating and terrifying story because you're going on with like this normal walk and then suddenly you see this potential girl who's alluring. I mean, I get it. I'm single myself, so I'd probably be dumb enough to do something like that. But
They're like, hey, it's a woman. Um,
exactly.
and she's dressed in white, and yeah.
And you got that
What's
like
she
slow
doing out
motion
here?
music. You got the slow motion music in your head, like do 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 do
Or,
do
or
do
is it
do.
more of a there she goes, there
That
she
works too, actually.
goes
There,
again?
it's like, yeah.
It's just the heck. uh,
Oh, I like
um,
that too, though. Just like the wording, it's like, yeah, maybe she's a bit attractive, not overly, no, not unattractive, maybe a bit
the competent attractiveness of the old head.
attractive. Yeah.
uh, no,
Oh,
I think I think it's interesting because like yeah, I rewatched the Creepy Canada episode as part of research for this. There's a good podcast by it's called Fireside Canada where I heard this story a year or so ago and reminded me of it. And there's different things online, but like apparently this story is was originally kind of pieced together from like local stories spoken, like word of mouth
yeah.
legends from the islanders that an author Henry Crane kind of pieced together. So that's why there is some, you know, level of, him not being sure, like 100%, if this is the same woman who was killed by World War II German soldiers, or if this was something that happened earlier. Like there are different stories that I basically kind of merged them because it's a little unclear.
Mhm.
But the end part is the same. That there's this woman that will, and it's really I found this to be the scariest part. The fact that she like drops to all fours and like scuttles up to you. Like if you saw that at night, dude, you would be like shitting bricks. Some
Oh, 100%.
like
Because, you
if
know,
someone if you're out and not expecting it and someone drops and starts like on all fours coming to you, no way. Like
man, I'm gonna
you
do
nope
that.
right
Like,
out
I'm
of
gonna do
that.
that at the airport. Like when you come to get me, I'm gonna just drop down and just start walking in like weirdly on all.
Security's just gonna tackle you, dude.
Yeah, I know. I shouldn't do it then. That's fair. I'll do it like I'll do it in like the morning, like waking up one day or something. But
Yeah.
no, I get it though. I honestly I feel like I'd be more terrified of that than seeing a giant moose.
Yeah, no. I would take the moose woman over the swamp hag because I think the swamp hag. Well, even though the legend of the swamp hag doesn't seem that she's like murdering anyone, she's traumatizing all of these people that she comes across. Like
Mm-hmm.
she's like, if you have a horrible, rotting corpse face in front of you, and you're smelling their dead stink, and they're freaking you out, like
The
that
sulfuric
affects you.
swamp too. Yeah, no, it definitely would. Oh man. And you honestly you did a great job with the visualization description as well. And then I think this
Thanks,
is the
man.
first time I've ever seen like the word "ma" written in the story, and I like that.
Yeah,
It was
I'm gonna
great.
have to do it more. It's a good word.
Just totally find a way to incorporate "ma" into every story. And we're
I
talking
know.
like "ma's" in a mouth, not like someone's "ma," because that'd be kind of weird.
Yeah, no, not like mama. um, but yeah, no, like reading the legends, hearing the story. Um, I get a lot of Evil Dead, Evil Dead 2 vibes from it. Like,
Mm.
there's kind of like a demonic grossness to this legend of like getting right up in your face and like, you know, spewing water and like just like gross. Like,
It's got that, yeah, like it's got that kind of, because I mean, I've been and you know this, man, like I've been a metalhead for almost like 25 years now,
hmm,
and like this reminds me of like that really kind of gross, like grimy, gore themed death metal, come to life. Like I could easily picture like a likeness of the Hag on like an album cover
oh, totally.
like that, and it's like
Yeah.
just wild. But I was gonna bring this up too because it made me think of it. I got to tie in Goosebumps again because when when people come back, the ones that survive their encounters of the Hag, it almost reminds me of like the story they told about why Fever Swamp is called Fever Swamp.
Wait, why was it called Fever Swamp?
So it wasn't because of the werewolf. It was called Fever Swamp because people would go into the swamp and then if they survived, they would emerge days later with this swamp fever where they'd be delirious and basically
Oh,
rambling incoherently and, about anything that they've seen or anything that happened to them while they were in the swamp. So it just made me think of that because I could actually hear like the kid's name. I can't remember what the kid's name was. I know the like main kid in that story's name was Grady, which is I'm sorry to say if there are any Grady's listening, but I just don't like that name.
whoa, that's a hot take right there.
I know.
Like Grady Hendrix, well-known author.
Who the hell
He's
is
like
that?
it's a well-known author. I just explained.
It's not well known if I don't know who it is.
Read more horror novels, dude.
No.
Okay, sorry. Okay, wait, the other kid that wasn't Grady. What were you
Yeah,
saying
the
about them?
the kid. So the kid that we found out at the end who became the werewolf, he's the one that told Grady the story of Fever Swamp and like why
Mm.
it was called Fever Swamp. So
See, I think I was too distracted by the fact that the werewolf looked like way too ape-like. Uh, it looked very gorilla-like in
the
that
were
episode.
ape of Fever Swamp.
Yeah, or like the skunk ape, or it. I remember being like that wolf is a little fat. Like it doesn't look quite wolf-like. And
Well,
anyways,
he's
sorry.
probably hungry like the wolf. It makes perfect sense.
Something about that wolf wasn't, I actually really liked that episode, but
It'd be amazing
they
if you just like, shit talk R.L. Stein, like just reach out to him on X and be like, "Look, I don't know if you had any control over this or not, but the story interpretation of the video episode of the TV episode of that werewolf, okay, was not anatomically correct."
Okay, so if I am shouting out R.L. Stein on Twitter or X or whatever, it'll be
That's
about
fair.
how I'm annoyed that they changed the hair color on Slappy
Oh yeah,
from
that's very true.
brown
He's mad about that.
on the cover art to like curly or bumpy orange, and they didn't need to do that. They had the perfect design.
At least it's not like the weird jet black sound of or sound. Wow, jet black look that they had for like the freaking Jack Black movies.
No, no, we don't talk about the Jack Black Goosebump movies. Actually, I don't know if they're like good or bad, but they looked like they would be kind of bad. So and I didn't like how they like softened the edge of Slappy. Like they tried to make him look less like bug-eyed and freaky, and they make him look a bit more like family friendly. And it's like, no, like what are you
Got it.
doing here? Like you
Got to be
ruined it.
terrifying. Yeah,
Yeah,
like you know what? We
stop
should
that.
honestly do like a kids version of the Swamp Hag, but like still leave it terrifying.
Yeah, no, like, um, I wonder if the swamp hag, yeah, the swamp hag would maybe, yeah, fit in like into like Fever Swamp or You Can't Scare Me, which I still hold up as like one of the worst Goosebump episodes,
Really
mainly
is.
for missing its potential. Like you had a promise of muck monsters, but actually, no, sorry, it's the book I really don't like because the creatures only really show up at the very end, and it's like before that, not very supernatural. And anyways, young me was very disappointed by that book, but I don't remember the episode being particularly that much better,
It's not.
um, which is like,
I think that episode's
yeah,
actually worse than Click. To be fair, I pretty much skip over it at this point.
I do too.
Mm.
For all
Okay.
our listeners, yeah, we're big fans of Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark, and they hold up for like a good, campy, enjoyable watch. Just something to put on around Halloween.
Plus, it's
Most of
fun to
them.
revisit those things with your kid. You know,
Oh
and
yeah,
indulging them.
totally.
Um, I was going to mention this too because like the very first thing that I highlighted was you were talking about the old hag who was a sleep paralysis demon. Um, so this is a
Yeah.
personal this is a personal story because I actually experienced sleep paralysis once.
Oh, did you see an old hag?
No, I didn't see an old hag. This is something I can actually laugh at now. And I might have told you the story before. So if I did, I apologize for retreading, but like none of our listeners have heard this, so I still want to share it because
Sure.
it's one of those things where 4-year-old me, when it happened, was absolutely terrified. Okay. But adult me at 38 can laugh about it. So I legit have this distinct memory of being paralyzed in my bed at 4 years old and screaming at the top of my lungs that there was a horse in my closet.
A horse?
A
No,
horse.
I don't think you told me this.
Yeah. So I legit saw like a horse that had brown hair and then had like a white line kind of like
Oh.
going up and down its mane, like up and down its like snout, right?
Oh, you really remember details of this?
Oh
Okay.
yeah, yeah. And I was absolutely terrified. I was literally like trying to scream, and I couldn't at first because I can see this thing, and it neighed at me and was kind was and was and coming was coming toward me as well, and like I could
What the?
see it, right? And I'm like, and I mean, okay, I can look at this rationally, right? Because fucking, I'm laughing as I'm saying this. I'm swearing too, but either way,
Are you
it's an
sure it
adult.
wasn't the Moose Woman?
See, that's why I wanted to tie it in because it's equine. But like, no, it genuinely terrified me because like at 4 years old, you don't expect to have your eyes open and see the horse, right? Coming toward you and there's nothing you can do. And I legit remember like running to the bathroom when I kind of regained the ability to move and just kind of sitting like in the bathroom on the floor, just bawling and being like, there's a horse in my closet.
Aw.
I know. And then now I can laugh at it because I mean the absurdity of it, right? And
Oh.
again, the reason why I'm bringing it up is because you mentioned sleep paralysis demon, in the Hag story, but also I go back to the Moose Lady, and Kate being worried about the Moose Lady taking her son, which is impossible because there's no way nobody wouldn't notice a moose going into her house, just like there's no way that a horse would fit in my closet.
Mm.
But
And you know what? I can connect it to my somewhat. I don't know if I'd call it a sleep paralysis story, but when I was at like a similar age, like I was really young, I woke up at night, and I don't think this like actually happened. I think I was just like, it was like a trick of the light. But at the time, I was terrified because next to my bed there was like a bookcase with some books, and laying and this is this is gonna sound kind of funny, but I was terrified at the time. But it was laying in like like when you see someone laying down in like a seductive pose.
okay, that would not be terrifying at all. Well, actually, I guess it depends on who's trying to be seductive.
It was
Like,
an alien, an alien
oh my,
laying in like a horizontal like head on their hand seductive pose,
oh man,
and
Granger might
scared
have been all over that. I don't know.
scared the shit out of me. But I was so like there was like so much adrenaline to my system. I was terrified, but I was like could not move or do anything. I actually just hid under the covers because I thought maybe it didn't see me seeing it, and I just like willed myself to like think happy thoughts and think about little animals and like little bear and I actually did
Don't
fall
think of
asleep.
seductive little bear though.
I was just thinking about like things that were like think about happy thoughts, don't think about this alien. I was like really young, and then I did fall asleep. And I woke up and I was like, oh,
Gone.
I'm
I had
alive.
a later one. It wasn't sleep paralysis, but like it's a vivid memory, and my mom will still bring it up all the time too. I oh man, I was in grade 9, and I had to go to school because like I don't know if you had this, but like my mom was the type where I usually had like 100% trust where if I told her I was sick, like I was staying home. But for whatever reason on this occasion, she's like, it's a Friday. You're going to want to go out with your friends. Like I'm sending you to school. It's because I had shots that day and I had a really bad reaction. So I wound up having a fever and like I went to school and everything. And I was just like completely done, finished the whole
Mm.
day. And I came in and I'm laying down and then I couldn't even move. And like I had a TV in the room, but like I didn't have a remote. So I would physically have to get up to turn the TV on and off. So like with the way I was feeling, there's no way in hell I was doing that.
Mm.
So my mom did what she thought was a really nice gesture and put on Unsolved Mysteries for me. But I was so
Okay.
delirious because of the fever that when you see the blue light on the intro, I was terrified. And I'm like telling her to shut the blue light off, and she wouldn't do it.
Oh, what?
I know.
He's
And
like,
then,
no, you will hear about these unsolved mysteries.
well, she just thought she was helping me, like
Mm.
do something positive, right? To kind of help me feel better. And to this day, I actually do like put on Unsolved Mysteries when I'm feeling sick. I do it all the time. So maybe it's
Oh.
because of that. I don't know. But like
Mm.
then I had this weird hallucination where she wanted to give me water and I told her to put it on a table, but it turns out that the table wasn't even there. So she's
Oh,
like having this discussion with me while I'm having like a delirium from fever. And I'm like, put the water on the table, put the water on the table. And she's like, what table? And then what fucked with me even more, the next day, she literally put a little TV tray, like a little table, in the exact spot where I said the table was that I was seeing in my like in my delirium.
oh, well, maybe she was given that idea um, by your table talk.
Could be, but like, that's kind of the closest thing I can think of for sleep paralysis. But like I say, this
Mm.
was very interesting, and I want to ask this too before I forget, because you mentioned that you kind of amalgamated a lot of the legends. So you did tell me when I was reading it and then listening, that this was the legend that you found the most interesting. So what were like some details from the other versions of the swamp hag that like maybe you found interesting but hadn't included?
So the other legend was just that it wasn't as recent as World War II. It was like maybe a bit older, and it was otherwise pretty much the same. That this woman um, was just found herself out in the swamps at night, and I guess it was more of like the creepy Canada version where
Mm-hmm.
she was lured there by fairies, or you know she just got like trapped or injured, or was sinking or something, and something happened and she was calling for help, and the main thing was that the townspeople just ignored her. They heard her pleas. They, due to their Irish superstition, to avoid the fairies of the swamp, were just kind of like, no, no, that's probably them tricking us, trying to lure one of us out there. Um, but it actually was a person calling for help, and then they later found out, oh, it was someone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then it's almost so that's really the other version. I think I just kind of took the elements of one theory was that it was this woman who was killed by um, U-boat soldiers, but it didn't explicitly say that she was like calling out for help and ignored. But then the more classic version was just not including the German soldiers. So like there's a pretty big overlap to the two stories. But yeah, I don't know. Like I think I did, to be fair, take a little bit of artistic license there, mainly because this was something that Henry Crane was piecing together, and he acknowledged that there's a bit of disparity in the origin story, which kind
Yeah.
of makes sense. Like if maybe that there are these two things that happen. Maybe that, oh yeah, at one point a woman was calling out for help and the town ignored her, and then we did find out that she actually did die. And maybe another story in the town is, well, there was a woman that was killed by the German soldiers. Like, how would you know which one actually became the hag? There would be no way of really knowing,
I mean,
unless
there may
you
be
know,
multiple hags. Maybe both of them had, and like I do feel
yeah.
too, because I'm not doing this in a way, and I hope you don't think I am, but I'm not doing it in a way to call you out for like lack of research. It's literally just I'm curious to know like what was left out. But I feel that when you mention Crane and how he didn't even know and was just piecing things together based on, oral tradition, right? Like what he had heard from the Islanders, it kind of gives you that little bit of artistic freedom where like you can take it and make it into like a little more of a coherent narrative, if that makes sense.
It does. Like, and I think that is kind of what happens with legends like these. Like, they do evolve over time. Um, and like, they're what's interesting about the World War II stuff is um, the German U-boats did like sink like local boats in that area. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was like there was a death count from the Nazis at that time near the island. Um, and so I thought that was like, a very interesting piece of history.
Yeah.
Um, and like there's other like little threads that like, yeah, I don't know, like it kind of, I don't know how essential they were to the story, but like there's another thing where there was a rumor that in, I guess, between the 40s and the 60s, there were many sightings of a person dressed up in white wandering the island, and it was a bit unclear if this was considered like another, you know, being or another entity other than the hag. But
Hmm.
I was seeing stuff that they found out that it wasn't actually, like the legend was that if you got close to this woman at that time period, you would see it was a man dressed in a dress who would
Oh,
then
okay. So
attack
man
you
with
and like
a
run
head.
after you, and they would
Wow.
see this person like leering outside the window and spying on people and doing lots of creepy stuff. So like there could have been this like whole like true crime element of like this, maybe deranged person out there in a dress, like just scaring people.
That could very well be. Because I mean, like, there are odd tales of people dressing up and doing things around graves or following legends. Like one of the things that I remember is it's very famous sighting that on the anniversary of Edgar Allan Poe's death, there was a guy that would dress all in black and he would place a single red rose and a half bottle of cognac on the Poe grave every year for about 30 years or so. I think it was in the 1900s, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh.
Um, so like when you tell me that, that's kind of like a thing that I'm thinking of.
Hmm.
Or you know, it's almost like this person for whatever reason wanted to keep the legend alive between the 40s and 60s and scare people away. And like one thing that kind of got me with the story of the man's struggle with the hag is just knowing how strong this entity was, because like I'm honestly picturing this petite kind of dainty woman in the 1940s, um, being completely overpowered and overwhelmed by this mass of German soldiers, but to know that the entity is strong enough to basically, you know, for lack of a better term, like manhandle a full grown adult male, that's very impressive. So like I could
Hmm.
see, the man potentially falling fulfilling that legend and basically attacking. But it does, when I look at it, obviously it doesn't take into account like the depiction that the man had of the hag and the smell of the sulfur and the corpse like features of her face and things like that. But it's kind of neat that you can have that level of interpretation, and that's why I love stuff like this with legends, where like if you cover a true crime case, you really want to get as factually accurate as you can. But for
Yeah.
something like this, because it's like an oral tradition, you have
Hmm.
that ability to kind of have your own interpretation of it, right? So um, that's why I say I like what you did, because you were factual everywhere that you could be, but also kind of took your own interpretation of it and made it into a cohesive story.
Well, yeah, like I think I had to do that for the sake of like streamlining the story together, and obviously like I would never you know I want to keep even stories like this pretty factual, but you know, it's like an oral tradition story. It gets a little foggy, for people, and at that point, yeah, you can kind of jump in and stitch things together with a little bit of a dash of creative license here and there, and it's
Mm-hmm.
I think appropriate. You know, yeah, like even the narrator for Fireside Canada, he wrote basically what sounded kind of like a short story for his podcast, where he really dug more into this person who was dressing as the woman, but he interpreted them more as like intentionally trying to scare islanders with the legend, almost like a a Scooby-Doo legend. So that was like his way of kind of interpreting it.
Would he have
Um,
gotten away with it if it weren't for those meddling kids, though?
exactly, and like he kind of covered more of like the factual threads that he knew about at the end, but he kind of started with a story like that, and
Hmm.
I thought it kind of worked. But
That's
I did end up preferring kind of more of like the creepy Canada version. But I will say, whatever version you prefer, like there's another legend on Bell Island. Well, there's actually quite a few, and a lot of them are really good. But there's
mhm.
one legend that kept popping up, and I'll tell you about it, but tell me if you find this at all interesting or if you are as uninterested by it as I am. Because I keep on hearing about the Bell
Is it a
Island
competent
boom.
legend, though?
There was this big boom on Bell Island, and
Hmm.
we don't know what it was. Was it like a UFO or what caused it? Like was it and it's like the mysterious boom from Bell Island. One day in like I think the 70s, they heard this big boom, and it's like this island they used to do mining. Like what do you think it was? It was like some
Yeah.
dynamite that went off. Like yeah, we don't know where it was or what caused it to go off, but like
Oh God, now we
there's
have a
not that much of a mystery to it. It's probably some dynamite.
now we have another tie-in. We're tying into our first story with dynamite as well. But
Yeah.
no, you're right, because that's actually one thing that I'm familiar with the Bell Island boom. It was actually covered on Weird or What, and
What like why are people so fascinated by that story? It's like they did a lot of mining on that island. Like like it was probably some dynamite or like but they're like what if it was some like no or it was like a cave that collapsed or
yeah,
something
yeah,
like
it could
that's
very
what
well be, because like if they were mining somewhere and there's an issue with gas escaping, right?
yeah.
It could have caused a spark. Boom, there you go. Potentially mystery solved. No, I get it. Like the telling of it was kind of interesting because like I remember that where they interviewed a guy who had heard it, and like the first two people that were impacted by it were like these two kids. I think they were like at the time, I think they were like under the age of 12, and they were biking, and then all of a sudden they just heard and felt this boom and like the ground shake and everything. So no, it's totally fair. It doesn't have the same impact as the this story or the the explosion of the Bell Island mine, because there's that one, which I think is
That's
interesting
another
because
really
there's
good one, the mining
yes,
ghosts. Yeah, that's a great one actually, which maybe I'll cover in the future. um But yeah, every once in a while you hear a story where you're like, why are people, so interested? Like this is a bit of a dud to me.
mm-hmm.
I'll give you another example, and this ties in a bit too.
All
But
right,
I mentioned how I'm a fan of the podcast Monsters Among Us. On a more recent episode, there was a woman saying, I think like what? How did she say it? But she heard like this weird sound or this weird almost barking sound, and then she like later casually said, "Well, I was just kind of falling asleep, or I just had put on some TV on in the background. I think I put on like one of those old kids horror shows like Goosebumps." And part of me was like, "Wait a second. Are you sure this wasn't the
the barking
barking from the
ghost,
intro?"
that or
Burp, burp,
the
burp,
barking
burp,
ghost,
burp.
that or the barking ghost, which is like one of the dumbest ghost themes episodes of Goosebumps. Jesus Christ!
I know we're like crapping on a lot of Goosebump episodes. There are some like there's a reason why we watch it still as
Oh yeah,
adults. But
there are absolutely some genuine gems out there. Like
House of
we
No Return.
yes, even though it's got some campy stuff in there too. But like anybody who's listening to this, that has younger kids, that maybe haven't experienced it, when they're around 8 years old or a little older, I would say definitely like show it to them. Show them
Yeah.
what it was like to watch like kids horror in the '90s, because like they will not air something like that now for this day and age.
Yeah, they really soften it. Like the effects would be better now, but they would
Yes,
soften the grit quite a bit.
exactly. And that'd be, less than ideal. We don't soften the grit here though. Like when we tell a story about a hag, like you're going to hear about that hag, and Cam's going to describe it in the best way that he can.
Yeah, and maybe this is the episode that will um, draw well-known actress Aubrey Plaza to watch the podcast, because I know she's randomly a fan of like witches, particularly hags. Um, where like there's a funny like clip of her online where like I think Conan O'Brien was like, "Wait, your Twitter handle is uh old hag? Why is that?" And she's like, "Because I like it." um,
That's fantastic.
so she mentions witches and hags. So yeah, Aubrey Plaza, if you're watching this, then I hope you enjoyed particularly the last story.
All of the
Um,
stories,
yeah, but all of them overall.
all of the stories, not
All of
just
them.
one, all of them.
No, all of them. Yeah.
I mean, I'll insert a hag into each one if it makes you listen. I have no problem doing that.
I'm sure I could find more hag stories. Like, wasn't there Chicago hag story that? Yeah, there's lots of hags out
Well, I know
there.
you mentioned that there's the Michigan hag as
Oh,
well.
that's what I'm thinking. The Michigan
Yeah,
hag.
yeah, and that got me extremely confused because there's a Bell Island in Michigan, which
Yes. Yeah.
ties into Lake Superior, and like I'm very connected to Lake Superior as well. Um, so yeah, I'm glad we sorted that out. Cam made a Simpsons meme about it, and it was actually very funny. So
Yeah. You know what? You'll just have to. It's hard to describe. Just go on the various Simpson Facebook meme groups and just like you'll find it.
you'll find it exactly.
Just scroll back a bit.
Or I think you might be able to search it actually. Like you're the Bell
Yeah.
Island hag.
No, I'm the Newfoundland old hag. My mistake.
uh,
uh,
I love that we can just like talk about this ridiculous, goofy banter, but like in all seriousness, there is a lot of loss in some of these stories as well.
hmm,
I do want to take a moment just as we kind of break the banter too, especially with the Granger Taylor story. I know, like when I led into it or led with that one, uh, it's very heavy subject matter because it deals with the potential of ending one's own life. So I just want to make sure anybody who's listening, if you are struggling, I just want you to know that there are resources available.
hmm,
Reach out to a friend, reach out to any counseling services, or bring yourself to the emergency. There is, of course, the 988 crisis line as well.
yeah,
Um, there are people who are there that care, and you do matter. You're very important, and
yeah,
I just want to get that across because it's a very important subject to me. I know I've mentioned on multiple occasions on my channel that about my father, and unfortunately, he passed because he lost his battle with mental health. That's the best way that I can say it. Um,
hmm,
so I just want to make sure anytime we mention a story like that, just again, please know if you're struggling, there are people who are there that can help you. There are people who care, and you genuinely matter to someone.
yes. I think that was incredibly well said. Um, and yeah, if this is, you know, if this podcast or just like, watching YouTube videos is something that can help take your mind off, the real life darkness, and focus on some, other darkness that you're, either not connected to or that's, a bit that has some of a mystery to it that's at least more, interesting or exciting. Like, I hope that it's helpful, and I hope that if if you're needing like a message like what Miller just delivered, like I think then that message was meant for you. So
Mm-hmm.
um,
And we hope too that the banter between us, like I know we make ourselves laugh. There's a lot of kind of insider references, but usually they're fairly surface level. But I hope you
yeah,
guys enjoy it, and like we can come across this on screen, because like we do this because we genuinely enjoy it, and
Yeah.
it's great to give these stories again the light that we feel they deserve, but also have a bit of fun with it, because it is heavy subject matter. So it's good to kind of take that time to lighten things up from time to time, and then bounce between heavy subjects. So um, that being said, would there be anything else that you'd want to share about your last story, or should we potentially wrap up episode 4?
I think we should wrap up episode 4. I'll let you send us off, but I just wanted to mention also, yeah, we're a very new podcast, so I think hint hint, if there's any story that you would like us to draw attention to, and if you were to throw it cough cough in the comments, I'm sure we would give it particular consideration. We would definitely consider it, doing including it in a future episode. So just something to consider, and also that helps us farm engagement. So yeah,
Exactly.
I
we,
wanted
we
to
have to
just
try to
share
be
that.
engagement farmers.
Please engage with the farmers and become engaged to the farmers. Anyways, yeah, any
um,
story ideas, especially if they're more obscure, like if you're like, hey, can you tell a story about this thing called the Loch Ness Monster? I might have to then be like, well, I think people know about that already. But if it's something like a bit more unique, or hell, like even if there's like a really unique small town legend that,
mhm.
ideally it would be good if there's some resource we can use from it. Um, but something like that would be great too. So, anyways, just
Yeah,
wanting to encourage that.
no, definitely. And please make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Like, there are certain aspects of these stories that I'd love to get engagement for. Just not necessarily like to help us out, of course, but just to see what people's opinions are. Like, my big thing with our opening story, for example, is like, what are your theories on Granger Taylor after hearing this? Do you subscribe to
Mm.
him, being taken aboard an alien craft and still being somewhere in the vastness of space, or do you subscribe to a more grounded theory? Or, what is your opinion on the Moose Lady or the Hag, or the spirits of the Frank Slide? So please make sure to take that time. We'd love to hear from it. We're both very active. If you see a comment or a reply from somebody named Visually Impaired Gamer, that's me, Visually Impaired
Mm.
Gamer 1987, because that's my gaming channel, which I'll just shamelessly plug for a moment as I can. I do mostly sports gaming with my own commentary. So if that's something you guys enjoy too, please feel free to check that out. It's across YouTube and Twitch. Visually Impaired Gamer 1987, all one word. Or the name of the show is the VIG Lounge. That's Visually Impaired Gamer Lounge, aka VIG. But I'm going to stop rambling because I could go on all night, and Cam won't want that because we both have day jobs. So
Yeah. I also
thank
throw that in the description usually, so check the description if you're interested in Miller's extra channels.
yes, I would certainly appreciate that. But thank you all for listening, putting up with banter of two bros from Ontario, sharing passion for all things paranormal and true crime. And until next time, I am Mill signing off. He is,
Cam signing off.
and I will bid you adieu, and have yourselves a excellent evening, memorable morning, or a uh, ambitious afternoon when you're watching this. I don't know. But either way,
A
all the best,
terrifying
everyone.
Twilight.
Ooh,
Yeah.
yeah, terrifying Twilight. I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
But
All the best, everyone.
and stay tuned for episode 5, which, if we can keep on schedule, will drop sometime in May.
Yeah.